whenever you're available, that'd be great. Just admitting people to the room. Thank you so much. Okay, great. Wonderful to have everyone here. This is Bree Lee from Bree Lee's Facebook group, Positive Parenting. I hope everyone is having a wonderful morning. And I know some of us, this is the evening. One of our speakers, Leanne, this is the evening for her. So thanks so much for joining us. I have a great group of presenters. Our presenters are, here's the schedule. At 10 o'clock, we have Reverend Susan Nason. 10:30, Leanne Wakeling. 11, Monica Belton. 11:30, Reverend Madeline Katz. 12 o'clock, Kristen Mozeiko, and 12:30, Michael Larson. So I'm so happy to have everyone here. Thanks very much. I'm going to do an intro for Reverend Susan Nason, and we'll get started. It's a pretty long day. So today we have Susan Nason. She's going to introduce the basic teachings of how to talk so kids will listen and listen so kids will talk. Susan will give a brief overview of the book, which teaches effective, easily implemented strategies for setting limits while maintaining a strong, positive, emotional connection with your child. She will introduce you to a simple 3-step parenting strategy guaranteed to succeed, and then open the floor for your questions. Concerns, challenges, and successes. Susan's talks are very interactive, so please bring your questions. So we're going to do a 25-minute role play, hopefully, or less than 25 minutes. Susan's going to introduce herself. 5 minutes to the closing, which would be 25 minutes. We'll have questions. So if you have any questions, you can start during her talk and we'll get to those questions. And if you'd like to do the role play, all you have to do is raise your hand and you can come join us. Thanks so much, everybody. Let's get started. Reverend Susan Nason, welcome. And you're on mute. Let me unmute you. Okay, great. Here we go.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with all of you. Thank you for inviting me on this panel. I'm excited to share the information that I've learned from studying with my aunt, Adele Faber, who wrote the book, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. So what I usually do is ask people to tell me how they're feeling about being a parent right now. 2 adjectives about how you're feeling. And it could be the good, the bad, and the ugly. So if someone would like to offer how they're feeling about being a parent, just unmute yourself and give me your 2 descriptive words, please.
We can raise our hands, or you can chat, or you can chat.
I think Rachel's ready to go, yeah?
Awesome. Okay. Rachel.
Oh, you just muted yourself. Can't hear you. So do you want to put them in the chat, and maybe Lauren or Logan, could you read them if they go in the chat? But if anyone else would like to say how they're feeling about being a parent.
So we have some.
Blessed and stressed, yes. Any other feelings?
Rachel said excited and tired.
Yes. Anyone else? So there's a lot of duality in how we feel about being a parent. And as I said in the offering, the good, the bad, the ugly. Parenting is hard work. And what I've developed from many modalities, many parenting modalities, and the spiritual work that I do is a 3-step parenting mantra that I'd like to share with you. And then I'm hoping that you will ask specific questions and possibly do a role play with me during my 25 minutes. So the brief overview is that everyone, the driving force for every human being is to be seen and heard. And it's very true for our children also. So acknowledging their feelings, holding space for them to have the feelings without rushing them through, without cajoling them out of it, without offering a bribe or a treat to make them move into the next step that we need, is a very valuable piece. Lots of things happen when we acknowledge another human being's feelings. They feel seen and heard. And as importantly, physiologically, our own bodies settle down. We find that extra bit of patience, that extra calmness that we're all seeking when we're parenting. It gives us some breathing room, and it makes that energetic umbilical cord that we all have with everyone we know, and especially with everyone we love. It makes that pulse with love. And that's our goal. How can we remain connected to our children? And one thing that my teammate Logan has expressed, that we all think children want attention. What they really want is connection. And this gives it to them. Just saying, oh, you're tired right now, or oh, you really don't want to stop playing with those Legos to go brush your teeth, makes a huge difference in the next steps to the interaction that you're going to have with your children. So the next step of my parenting mantra, the first step was acknowledging feelings. And if you're a note taker, write that down and highlight it. The next step is to either offer a choice or give information. So offering a choice, especially for our young children, is very, very effective. It gives them full autonomy. And as you know for yourself, and as you've seen with your children, once they're on board, once they feel they have agency, once they feel they have input, they're usually more likely to cooperate. So going back to the example about brushing teeth, oh, it's hard to stop playing with your Legos to go brush your teeth. I'm wondering, do you want to put that last yellow piece on, or are you ready to walk away and come brush your teeth? And then later or tomorrow, you'll be able to go back to the Lego building. So you've offered a choice. Hopefully they'll pick one of them, but we all know some children won't. Our 4-year-olds who are really coming into demanding autonomy will often push back. Our preteens, our teenagers certainly will push back. So you might say to them, oh, I see you can't decide right now. I'm going to decide for you. And then certainly our little ones, we can, and because we're not impatient or angry, we'll be able to usher them down the hall to brush their teeth. With our teenagers, that might be more difficult, and I'm not sure if any of you have older children, so we certainly could get into that in a role play if you do. So those are the 3 steps: acknowledge feelings, offer choices or give information, set limits. And what I'd love to do now is hear from you with some of the concerns, issues, challenges you're actually having, so we could apply these skills in a role play. Do I have any volunteers?
You can either raise your hand if you'd like to be a volunteer or type me in the chat box.
And to raise your hand, you go to the participants tab at the bottom of your screen, and there should be a little blue hand on the right-hand side.
Bree, how about you? You are muted. You are muted, Bree.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's do a role play for sure. Putting me on the spot here.
I am. But I'm on the spot if no one participates.
Yes. Okay, so let's
Oh, I think Rachel actually had one.
Okay, great. So let's go with Rachel. And her audio is not working, she's saying. Let me go.
Try unmuting yourself.
I can unmute her as well.
Okay.
So I'm just asking to unmute, and okay, Rachel. Okay, great. Rachel, looks like you're unmuted. Can you test real quick?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm going to put Bree back on the spot.
Okay.
Unless there is another parent who is on who would like to ask a question and do a role play. I'm very gentle in my role plays, I promise. Bree,
okay, great. I can start. My kids can sometimes be challenging. I have a 5-year-old daughter. She just turned 5, and then a 6-year-old son. He turned 6 in June. And at times, I get nervous and stressed, I'll have to be honest. And for instance, today, they're upstairs. I'm in the spooky, not so spooky basement. And I'm nervous because it's a 3-hour run. I have a friend over here who's babysitting them, and my husband is doing that as well. But I know at some point they're going to be curious and they're going to want to come down here and maybe get involved. So that is a little nerve-wracking. And what I did was I bribed them. And I know you said that wasn't such a good thing to do, but I'm like, what can I do so they can behave? The easiest thing I said was, I'm going to rent you a movie. So that was one bribe. The second one was a food bribe, and I know that's like the worst to give, a food bribe, if you're like, you know, have food issues. So I gave a food bribe, pizza. So those were the two things I bribed them with. And after I heard you speak, I'm like, maybe that's not such a great thing. But I kind of like am in dire need for them to be quiet and chill while I'm down here doing this conference.
Thanks for bearing your soul and being so
Yes.
vulnerable. So it sounds to me that you took steps to have self-care for yourself and for us.
Yes.
That you decided that the way to have your children cooperate was to offer them a treat and to let them know that you pretty much are off limits. And I'm also hearing that you are prepared. You might not know what you're going to do, but you are prepared for them to want to see you during the day, because 3 hours away from you after you've been together for how many months,
Yes,
probably will be very hard for them and for you. And we so much want to see your children. So what you did was an on-the-spot problem solving. Hey guys, this is what's happening today. What will make it easier for you to let me be downstairs in the basement? Oh, you want pizza? No problem. Oh, you want a video? No problem. So certainly what you did was self-care, and I applaud you for it.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I wish I didn't have to go to the extent of, you know, obviously getting self-care by bribing them, but I guess as they get older, it might be easier.
I hear that you think it's a bribe. What it really sounds like is, you know, your children, and this is what they needed in the moment. It's a short-term problem, and you throw a short-term solution at it.
Okay, great.
So there are times that we do reward them. The problem with bribes and threats in general, overall, for constant behavior, is they don't work. They backfire. The children don't have that inner compass. They don't have that checking in with themselves. Is this the right thing to do or not? But you didn't even have to go there with them. You just thought up the solutions and offered it to them. So it wasn't a bribe with a counter threat. If you don't do this, you are not getting pizza. You didn't say that. You said, hey, this is going to be hard on all of us. I'm getting you pizza. I know how much you love it.
Great. That makes me feel validated. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wanted to find out if anyone else wanted to talk to Reverend Susan Nason and just be open and honest. If you'd like to talk, you can raise your hand or type a message. Otherwise, I can speak about something else. Do we have any volunteers?
Oh, here's one from Rachel. I have a 4-year-old girl, 2-year-old boy, and 2-month-old boy, girls and twins, and here you are on the screen. Woo-hoo! We are doing pretty well, but my daughter is really struggling with teasing her brother, and when she teases, he starts hitting or pinching. Yes. Lauren or Logan, I'm going to ask you to read back what she says in case I'm missing it. So Rachel, I'm wondering what you think is motivating them. And I know you know what's motivating them.
Are we typing or?
They do want the connection and attention.
Great.
Yeah, they do want connection.
They do. So Logan, can I put you on the spot? Will you talk about how you circle through? Logan is a preschool teacher, movement teacher, and just the most extraordinary person to have with your children that you will ever have. So can you talk about how you circle through and make connection?
Yeah. So something that I do is I will sort of gauge how often the children I'm working for, the individual children that I'm working with, need to experience connection. So some children need it every 5 minutes, some children need it every 10. And I will take about 2 minutes off of however much time that is, and I'll circle through and do a little check-in with the kids. I'll say, I'll make an observation. I'll say, oh, you're drawing with crayons right now. Or if children get a lot from like physical attention, I'll give them a high five or a pat on the back if I know that's something they're comfortable with, to sort of give them the connection that they need in that moment and keep them from demanding it in other ways.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very, very clear. So you're sort of preempting the meltdown that the child's going to have, which causes them to tease, which then causes the escalation of hitting back. Rachel, is that something that I hear that you're busy? You have 3 kids and a newborn, but is that something you think you can build into your day to start noticing how long a span they have that they are cooperative with each other and go in before that time limit is up? And it is an observation, as Logan clearly said, you make an observation. So you don't have to sit down and play with them. And you're not saying, oh, how wonderful. Oh, that's great. You're just saying, oh, I see you're building with Legos, or I see you're coloring. It makes a huge difference for children.
She says, yes, I do.
Okay. Who else has a question?
Fiona says, hello, I have a four-year-old spirited boy who is quite vocal with feelings and will often tell his aunt to go away and things like I don't like you.
Oh.
We have had many discussions about feelings using appropriate language and redirection. Sadly, I have threatened a time off as well, but the results are short-lived.
Yeah, just a sec. I'm adjusting my volume. Give me a second. Timeouts generally don't work. If we need a timeout instead of attacking, hitting our child, that's when I would use a timeout. Fiona, is it possible for us to do a little role play? Are you comfortable speaking, if not at least coming online with us? We can continue this way, that's fine. So something from—
Hi, Reverend Susan. Fiona said it's okay by her to do a role play.
Oh, great.
Yes, so I'm going to ask her to unmute.
I think she said her child's sleeping, and so she wants
Oh,
to—
now she said, sorry, my little one is asleep.
Okay.
I can see that.
So we're going to do the role play for you. Lauren, can I call on you? Do you want to play the aunt, Lauren, and will you play her son, Logan?
Yes.
And I'll be her. So we're going to jump right into what you can do. Usually when I have more time, I'll do a role play with what is happening so you can experience what that feels like, but we're going to jump into what to do instead. So Logan, I believe that you are going to tell Aunt Lauren that you don't like her. Sorry, Lauren.
It's okay.
I don't like you.
Well, that's not very nice.
Get away from me.
Oh my goodness, I hear 2 people who are not too pleased with each other right now. I bet that doesn't feel good to anyone. So I'm going to come out of roll and say what I just did was I acknowledged everyone's feelings in the room. Let's continue.
Yeah, I don't like her.
Oh, you have strong feelings about her right now.
Yeah, I want her to get away from me.
Is she too close to you?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm wondering if you want to tell us where you want to sit, Logan, and that Aunt Lauren can stay where she is.
I want to sit in this chair over here.
Okay. So that's in the moment. So behind the scenes, offline, later in the day, I might say to Logan, hey, Logan, you had a strong reaction to Aunt Lauren.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell me more about what you were thinking and feeling?
Well, I mean, when she's close to me, it makes my body not feel good.
Oh, she was in your space, in your personal space.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how we can let her know that without hurting her feelings, because I think her feelings were hurt when you said you didn't like her.
Okay.
I have some suggestions. Do you have anything that you want to suggest?
I don't think she should be allowed in rooms with me. That way I don't have to see her.
Okay, you know what? Let's write that down. So here the written word is very powerful, especially for our children who are not yet reading or writing. they know if we sit down and start writing this down that we mean business. So I'm going to write down anything, even if it's outrageous, even if it's against my family values, I'm going to actually write it down so the child knows I'm really listening. Let's write that down. I have a suggestion, but I can hear more of yours first, or you could tell me more of, or I could tell you some of mine.
And Reverend Susan,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. You have somebody down here, Katie Walsh. She has a question. So when you guys wrap up, if we could look at her question.
Sure. And if
Okay.
she's willing to do a role play. So we'll speed this up. Logan, thank you so much. Lauren, thank you so much. So what I would do is go through this little on-the-spot problem solving. I'd write down some solutions. I'd make sure that I say, in this family, we are polite to people. In this family, even if someone's too close to us, we are kind to people. I'd make sure that my child knows that their body is their body, and if someone's too close to them, everyone wants to know. It's how you tell them. So Fiona, I hope that helps, and you're welcome to PM me if you at another time want to do a role play or ask some more questions. So yes, can we hear Kathy's question? And if she's on, I don't see who that is. If she's on and can do a role play with me, that would be even better.
Katie Walsh, is that okay by you? She has a
there
question.
You are, Katie.
Great. Let's see.
Katie, can you unmute yourself and put your video on? And just a time check, please. How much more time do we have?
Yes. We have 6 minutes for the
Great.
25 mark. Yes.
Okay. Katie. No, okay, so would someone read her question?
Yes, I can read her question. Her question is regarding the check-ins on the last question. So the last question was from Fiona. I've always been taught not to interrupt independent play to build that skill. What are your thoughts on that?
So what Logan very clearly described was not interfering and not really interrupting play, but to walk through so your child knows that you're thinking about them, that you're interested in them, that you care about them, and you are commenting as you keep moving through the room, unless it's a child that does prefer the physical high five or a pat on the shoulder. You're moving through the room still on your schedule. Oh, I see you're playing with Legos, and you keep going. It does not really interrupt play unless a child is on that verge of needing you to check in before they get into mischief. Katie, does that answer your question? So as Logan explained, that you're measuring when that child really needs the connection, and you're going in about 2 minutes before that so that no one's upset. Ah, I see, yes, thank you. Okay. Anyone else have a question?
If no one has a question, I have another question for you, Reverend Susan.
Yeah, please.
Great. My son and daughter, my daughter was in pre-K full-time last year. My son was in kindergarten. So now they've moved up, obviously. And the question is, my son noticed a chart at school, like a behavior chart that the teacher was making for one of the kids who really needed, and maybe, I don't want to say really needed it, behavior chart.
No child needs a behavior chart.
And my
ever.
son was like so obsessed with it, and he wanted to do it when he got home. He was like, I really want to do this. I want to know when I'm acting good or acting bad. My daughter had something similar in pre-K. There was a red face if she wasn't behaving well, and a green face if she was behaving okay. And I don't, I'm not particularly fond of it, but they seem to enjoy that style. I don't know how long it would last, but I was just wondering your points on that, your opinion.
So behavior charts are very, very, very judgmental, and children should always feel whole. They should always feel loved. They shouldn't feel like because they're behaving in a certain way that they're not lovable. And that's what happens with the chart. Also, it's an outside judgment instead of what we want them to develop is that inner voice of, I'm doing the right thing. This is how we behave at school, and it may be different than how we behave at home. So by having those charts, you really limit a child's self-awareness. So what I might do, will you do a little role play with me?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, so be your son asking me to make that chart.
Okay. Mommy, I saw this chart at school for this one kid and I want to try it out myself. I think it'd be great if you gave me a check mark when I was behaving, and an X when I wasn't behaving. I really want this chart.
Wow, you're curious about what that would feel like to have my making a mark to say you're behaving well or you're not behaving well.
Yes, and when the kid behaves well at school, he gets more playtime out in the hall, which I wish I had, and he also sometimes gets a treat, which I wish I had.
It's hard to watch someone else to get something that you don't have.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. You know what? Do you want to know what I do for myself? Can
What?
I share that with you? So when I do something that I know I shouldn't have done, I sort of make a note about it. And I know for myself that I did something right or wrong.
But I
And
think
the same,
yes.
so I'm sorry, I'm still
Yes,
in law.
no. Yes.
And I also, when I do something that I know I did well, I sort of pat myself on my chest and say, I did a good job. So I'm wondering if you want to do that for yourself, you could either do it this way so to notice it or pat yourself, or you could keep your own chart. But in this family, we don't judge people that way.
Great. I like that. And he actually did start making his own chart, when he was interested, but then he lost interest.
Yeah.
So he was giving himself check
and how
marks.
sad is it that our teachers are still using that very punitive way?
Yes. They have a thinking chair. My daughter's pre-K. They actually have a thinking chair. Like it's kind of like a timeout chair, and I didn't like that either. But the way I feel like it could be worse. Choose your own battles with the school.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm wondering if anyone has any questions. And we have something. One of our guests says that this is such great info. So he really likes this. He sent me a private message. So thank you so much, Reverend Susan. And is there anyone else? You can either raise a hand or type a message in the chat box.
Hi, Bree.
Hi, Reverend Madeline.
Yeah, I see that Kristen mentioned that some people didn't get the info for joining the Zoom conference on positive parenting. So I just put the ID and code number there, but you have to approve the post for people to get in.
Okay, I'm not sure if I want to do. I'm not sure if I want to do that.
Okay,
I'd
just
rather
letting
send
you
it
know.
privately.
Fine.
And if it's already published, we should probably delete it.
I haven't published it.
Okay,
You
great.
haven't.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
If I could take
And
my last 2 minutes to
Reverend
say,
Susan, you have 5 minutes. Yes.
5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, then we probably have time for one more question. if
Okay,
someone-
great. Anyone else with any questions?
Here's one. We are working on trying to get through the day without a pacifier, and I'm wondering if you have, and I can't read the rest of it without going in.
You have any suggestions on this? I know it is a comfort for her, but how can I help her get through that?
How old is this child, and who's asking that question?
This is Katie Walsh. Katie.
Hi, Katie. How old is the child with the pacifier?
2
2 years old.
2 years old. So in fact, 2-year-olds still need to be able to suck. It releases serotonin, which is that happy drug. She will, if you take the pacifier away, and Lauren, correct me if I'm incorrect, she could find other ways, other means to satisfy that sucking urge, either thumb or a piece of fabric or her arm. I'm wondering if you're concerned about it displacing her teeth. They've actually done studies, and it does not impact teeth negatively. If you're going to have buck teeth, you're going to have them whether you use this pacifier or not. So I'm hoping that answers your question. It is something that children still need to do so that they can settle down to go to sleep. It's much better than giving them a bottle with milk, because that's going to rot their teeth. Does that answer your question, Katie? Not the answer you wanted, I know.
I know in some cultures, I think they have like a pacifier, like celebration, where they like get rid of it at a certain time, like they move on.
She says it's been recommended by a doctor to start ridding it by 2 years. Otherwise, I have no issue with it.
Yeah, so I would go with your gut, the no issues with it piece of your gut that's saying it's fine, and your child will on their own, unfortunately, usually because of peer pressure, give up the pacifier. And if not, we need to look at other concerns. What's this child's overall anxiety level? And this is for older children, not 2-year-olds. Please make sure you hear that. What's the child's overall anxiety level? What's that child's sensory integration? What's happening with their sensory integration?
Rachel says, I'm a pediatrician and discussed with the pediatric dentist who say 4 years old, although that is not the same across the board. Yes,
Thank you, Rachel, for confirming that. So I think I will once again say goodbye. I think I'm out of time. This was a pleasure. Anyone who's been on the Zoom session and has any questions specifically for me, please PM me. Thank you, Sabrina. I'm so honored to be part of this. You are muted, Sabrina.
Wonderful to have you here. Thank you so very much to be, for being a part of From Stressful to Peaceful Parenting. So thank you. Wonderful to have you. And if people need to get in touch with you, how do they get a hold of you?
My email address is rev, dot Susan, S-U-S-A-N, Nason, N as in Nelly, A-S-O-N, @gmail.com. I'm sure you could also reach out to Sabrina and she will forward any messages, or PM me on Facebook.
I definitely will.
Thanks
so much.
everyone. I'm sorry that I won't be on for the rest of the speakers. I will watch the video once it's available. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Logan.
Bye, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lauren and Logan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so our next presenter is Leanne Wakeling, and she will be presenting on, let's see what we have here, Parenting as Leadership, Looking Through the Lens of Critical Alignment Model. The framework facilitates creating an awesome family culture that enables evolutionary adjustment as children grow and mature, establishing the foundations to navigate the roller coaster of raising adults to be emotionally intelligent and resilient. The qualities considered their predictors of success in the 21st century. Great, Leanne, you have 25 minutes, and at that 25-minute mark, I will ask the audience for some questions. Thank you so much. All yours.
Terrific. Thanks. Thanks so much, Bree, for the opportunity. I feel privileged to be in this lineup. So thanks very much. I recognize a few names of people that are in the group. I sort of play fairly actively in the community. I love supporting parents, and I often recommend one of Susan's other relatives, the subsequent book, the How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen, as a resource for parents. I haven't actually read the original one, but I was introduced to the later version by Adele's daughter, Janet, as a resource. And the lens that I'm looking through is much more strategic, because as parents, one of the things is that we can get caught up in the whirlwind of every day. And while it's great to have tactical solutions, which is in the moment, it's also wonderful to have, you might call it a North Star, is to know where you're going, which makes it much easier when things get out of hand to be able to come back round and say, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. This is not working right now, but what's the long game? Because it's really easy to get caught up in the moment to moment conflict, chaos, that can happen in a family. And when we have that check-in point to remember that when we're raising children, we're raising them to become emotionally intelligent adults. And that's a 25-year journey, give or take. And when we can then get it back into perspective and realize that we're doing this for a long time, and our children don't even have their whole brain for the first 10 years of life. They don't have a whole brain until age 10, which comes from the work of Daniel Siegel, who is a world-renowned child psychiatrist and studies the neurological development of children. And that sort of helps a lot when you get into perspective that, okay, the reason that my 2-year-old is not coping right now is because they're doing the best that they can with the neurology that they have in this moment in time. And that then gives you that ability to then say, breathe and step into recognizing that it's so much more than having a fight with your child now, and getting focused on what is their need. No child is ever doing anything to us. They're not responsible for our emotional management. They are flat out managing their own emotions all the way up until adulthood. An adult to adult relationship has reciprocity. When we're raising a child through to adulthood until they are adults, they are not responsible for how we feel. We are hopefully teaching them along the way the skills, but they are not responsible for us and how we feel. And that can be, it's particularly challenging for those adults who perhaps have parents who were perhaps a little more dysfunctional emotionally and put their emotional management, said, you made me feel like this, you made me that. Well, the reality is that nobody else can make us feel anything. We do actually have to choose. It's just that for a lot of us, we don't have the personal self-management. Certainly was me for a very long time into adult life. And so I do appreciate that it doesn't always come across as easily as when we're talking about it. And so part of it is about appreciating that it's only with conscious awareness can we make choices and take intentional action to do life differently, which is why we'll get caught up, even with our best intentions. If we haven't done any personal development work, we will go under stress to what's familiar to us. So if we're a yeller, recovering yeller, that will go to that point. And one of the best things that I liked at the end of the subsequent How to Talk book was that there are moments where it's going to be like that, where no matter what we do, it isn't working. And it's not that we've done anything wrong, it's just that in that moment, our child's not capable of meeting our expectations. And as long as we remember that, it makes it much easier to avoid the anger and frustration, which some of us will have experienced, that our parents visited upon us because they were frustrated with our inability to meet their expectations. But kids are doing the best that they know how and are capable of. And when we remember that, we can keep it in perspective, which means we can respond more appropriately in those difficult moments. And if we have our own little breakdown of emotional management, is to remember the appropriate thing is to apologize. And that's also something that not a lot of adults can do. And I might possibly perhaps have been guilty of that during my time earlier in life. And I'm just really fortunate that my husband is a very well-rounded, mature, emotionally intelligent person who was able to facilitate the gap. And that's another part of parenting and being the adult and being the leader, is to remember that leadership is about creating an environment to which our child can follow, so that they are desiring to be successful because they want to please us. If our child is not meeting our expectations, it's up to us, because we're the only people who are capable in the parent-child relationship to look at things and do things differently. Because our kids just don't have those skills yet, especially little ones under the age of 10. They just don't. And I'm curious, how does that feel to you right now? Is that helpful to understand? Or are you thinking, OMG, what is that lady talking about? Because the critical alignment model is to look at the environment that we're creating. And it applies at every level of decision making, from creating a culture to doing my homework. And it starts out, and I'm sure many of you will have heard the starts with purpose, starts with why. And if any of you have read Simon Sinek or heard of his work, it's about starting with why, because that's our North Star. That's what keeps us focused on where we're going. And once we've decided that, we can create a vision of the success we want to create. So it's recognizing that we're on a journey and that we're not there yet. And I don't know about you, but it's much less frustrating to know that we're not there yet than expecting that it should be successful. This kid should be successful right now. It's that constant and never ending towards the improvement of how we're able to live. And by setting up the family culture, so is the vision of where we're going, the mission we're on is to get there, then we can establish, well, okay, what are the values of the family that can live that life? What are the standards that enable the values in order to be on the mission to live that standard of life? What are our beliefs? What are the rules? What are the attitudes that we need to have? And so it gives us a set point that when, the thing is, life gets chaotic from time to time. It just does. And at least having gone through that process, you've got that ability to step back in. And what happens with the rest of the critical alignment model is empowering us the success to go on that journey. And it's the next level are the standards and the structures, and the structural element is about all of the scaffolding that we need to empower the successful achievement of that environment. And most of us don't think in the big picture frame, because when we're parents, especially parents of small children, there's an awful lot of detail. A lot of us are herding cats. You're just trying to work out how you're going to get it all together. And having that, some people will call it a family manifesto. Other families will choose to call it something different, but it's a plan for success, knowing that it's a journey. and putting that together and empowering each other to create those qualities that will empower the success of the journey that we want. Because it is tough to just be on autopilot. And the short term, looking at the short term fixes, because a lot of, whether we call it discipline, whether we call it child management, a lot of, and maybe I just live in an alternate universe, but a lot of those approaches are for short term solutions. Therefore, dealing in the moment, therefore getting that in the here and now. And as Susan was mentioning, is that the reason that punishment and rewards and that system of child management doesn't work, because it doesn't work on adults either, is certainly with children, they'll outgrow it. You know, the punishment and the reward has a short lifespan until it's no longer. And that's the thing about punishment is, well, okay, what happens when they go past the edge of this particular issue? What are you going to do next? Yes, that fear-based action worked in this moment, but where have you got to go? What's going to happen next? And that's the reason that we're moving away from that. And part of the reason that we know that this no longer works is because we now understand that a child is able to process the world in a different way to what we expected. And that's the work of Daniel Siegel in the 90s. And so for a lot of us, we're being managed and taught on an old world system that no longer applies. Because in the 20th century and before that, we were less educated, we were factory workers or office workers, and we worked in an environment where we were working together and we all needed to comply. And so compliance was very much a valued characteristic. However, as we've progressed both socially, we've also discovered that as humans, we form our identity in a different way. We're an incomplete human brain at birth. So old world made an assumption that we just need to be controlled so that we know how to act. But no, that doesn't work, because unless we're doing it in age appropriate according to the skills that human brain has, it's a waste of time. We're actually driving ourselves nuts to try and make a child comply to an outcome that they have no capacity or capability to meet. And that's what I like about, if you haven't read The Whole Brain Child, highly encourage it just to get a great perspective, because we've known for many years the kind of milestones that the body, we know how it grows. We know the things that we do a long time. But we haven't known, most of us who are adults, it wasn't possible for our parents to know because the information didn't exist. And that's another part of, is the ability to forgive those around us who didn't know what was not possible to be known. And for our parents to recognize that they were always doing the best they knew how and were capable of, as is the case with all of us. Because I have have had a very fractious relationship with my mother. I am an oldest child with a mother who was completely overwhelmed. And she didn't know how to cope with a highly intelligent, overly rambunctious, opinionated, very strong-willed child. And especially as she was taught that containing this human is the way what you're supposed to do. So she and I were constantly butting heads. And I remember when I was about 12 or 13, and there is my mum absolutely frothing at the mouth, angry at me because we'd been having this difference of opinion. And she says, my mum told me that when I had children, I could be the boss. And you're not letting me be the boss. And I didn't understand then, but I now know that that's exactly her child self in that moment. That was her emotional maturity that was available to her, because she'd been squashed down and managed so that she never got the skills to cope with how to process that type of emotion. Because many of us, when we were growing, were either be quiet, sit still. We were being managed to please our parents, so we became people pleasers, or we were rescuers because we knew that our parent couldn't cope unless we behaved in a certain way. And it's part of our emotional, any of us who are adults that don't manage our emotions well, and this may not be comfortable for some, I know it took me a little while to get my head around it, was that in those moments, and you will have seen an adult who's behaving like a 2-year-old. Well, emotionally, their 2-year-old self is where that emotional management skill got stunted. And it's why they can't cope, because they never learned any skills in that particular emotion to manage it. And that's what positive parenting is, to try and overcome. The mission is to overcome the lack of ability to manage the emotions, that most of us adults have at least some area of our emotional range that we don't handle well. I happen to be the tears of anger, because sadness was not welcomed in my family, but I could get away with anger. Because my mum and I, that was kind of the interpersonal conflict that was comfortable for her, was in fact the fighting, because we're fighters, not flighters. And so while it was completely dysfunctional, it was also what was familiar to her and how she could cope, which is then why I could have that range of emotion. And my dad's a little same. He's a little bit more mild-mannered than my mum. And you'll notice it in your family, because there's this thing called the family system. And the family system is how we operate as an interdependent unit, because we are connected to each other, even when we don't like each other very much. We are influenced by that. And for those who are interested, like me, in doing research, the work of John Bradshaw in the 70s and 80s, and even through into the 90s, was about how that family system, how does it come about? And the thing is that even when we don't like our family system, if we don't do conscious and intentional work on ourselves and how we respond to the world, we will repeat the system in some way. For those of us who rebel against our family system without doing work, what we do is we just alternate the generation. So the dysfunctional parent becomes the dysfunctional grandparent, and those two have the same interface. We just repeat the patterns, because the environment, the way we parent our child, is how our children become themselves. So if we under function, so too, I was going to say lax, too loose, too, if we react to a dominating parent by going the opposite to the dominating parent, we actually create chaos for our child, because our child needs to know that we know what we're doing. Even if we don't, they need to feel our confidence and certainty. So it is a case of considering some of us might need to fake it till we make it, because if we're going to be of value to our child, we need to be the leader that they can follow. You know, I see lots of within the community, within any parenting community, but my child doesn't listen. Well, your child won't follow you if you're not leading. And what I mean by that is being there for them, listening without judgment, justification, and defensiveness. Like in the model that Susan showed us, is she used the acknowledgement. I happen to use validation, but in the end, it's recognizing the person even when you don't like the behavior. It's, you know, when I was growing up,
Leanne,
my dad always said,
Leanne, I just wanted to give you the 5-minute mark. I don't know if you want to take any questions or if you want to.
If people have questions,
there looks like there's
more
one
than
question.
Happy to.
Great, from
And
Rachel.
I can't see it. Yes.
Okay, I'll read it. Do you have any examples of that North Star or manifesto? I haven't really thought about what the goal for us would be besides getting them alive to adulthood.
That's a good place to start. I usually, when I'm working with families, what I do is and I'll put it in as a resource link, and you can download. So it is an opt-in, but you can download the booklet that outlines the critical alignment model. And then on my blog is the 12 steps to creating a family that thrives, are the activities that you can do. And if you haven't yet thought about it, feel free to PM. There's an exercise in coaching, and I assume it is in other modalities as well, called the ideal average day. So it's, what is the day that you're more than happy if it became Groundhog Day and you could live it every day forever? What does that day look like? And that's what you're moving towards. It's the quality of life experience that you want to have. And what that does then is it allows you to then see, where are the gaps? What is it that I need to fill in order to be able to get there? What is it that I need to accept is not there yet? And that's where the joy of parenting can happen, because you realize you're not trying to make it all happen right now, because our kids don't come in right now. And quite frankly, if you've got a kid under the age of 4, they don't care what anybody else thinks. They actually don't have intrinsic empathy yet. If you've got a child younger than 4 who shows empathy, it's because they are seeing empathy demonstrated. You can take points, parenting points, if your child shows empathy at a younger age, because they just don't have, it actually doesn't exist. You know, I've seen a few times now, but my kid's a narcissist. Well, yeah, they are, because all children only care for themselves probably for actually most of their lives. They learn how to accept others, but certainly for the first 4 years, a kid isn't interested. They don't have the neurology. They certainly don't have the emotional regulation skills to be able to do that, because if we had a child that had the whole brain, I don't know that there is a mother alive could actually deliver that baby naturally, because they'd need our adult-sized head to hold the brain, which is why they have the smaller, they actually have less pieces. Their brain actually doesn't have all of the pieces. What evolution has decided is that a baby only needs enough brain in their first year to sleep, cry, poop, and eat. That's it. Everything else is going to be coming later on. And yes, they're growing a relationship with you because you're the person that keeps them alive. They're completely reliant on you. And when they're upset, they can't regulate themselves by themselves. They actually need to know that we are nearby. They're not like a baby horse or a baby, most other animals, where they arrive and yeah, they might need to get on their feet. But then if danger happens, they can run on their own. Human babies just don't have that capability. They are reliant on us. And then they get a little bit of more brain. But it's just limbic. It's still not thinking brain. Their experience is still entirely literal. And that's really important to understand, that a human baby, a human child's experience until age 6, which is known as the imprint period, their experience is totally literal, which is, they have no logical reasoning skills. It's why they learn so quickly. We do more learning in the first 5 years than practically we will for the rest of our lives, because everything is being learnt. So Mother Nature, God, whoever you believe, says, well, okay, we'll totally rip out the filters so that everything can go in. The problem is that they then also have no ability to reason or understand what's going on. So if they get deserted...
Leanne, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
I just wanted to give you a minute or so to wrap up. Time went fast.
Look, and that's, yeah, and this is something that I could, as you can probably tell, speak on for quite a lot of time. I'm quite passionate, but it's why we have to be the leader. And I'm so grateful for this time and opportunity. And to learn more, please feel free to connect with me. I'm open to private messages. I have a Facebook page, which is Leanne G. Wakeling, and it's skilling to adult in the 21st century, because a lot of the work that I do is the deeper inner child work to help parents heal the things that trigger them with their children. And also we work together on the tactical skills, because a lot of times the reason that we're doing things and not succeeding is because what we've interpreted things to mean and what we're actually doing are creating it. And so we get stuck in that whirlwind and think, but I'm doing everything. Why is this not working? And it's step back, reconnect, use that critical alignment model, even down to, well, okay, I don't want little Johnny to be tearing up paper and pinching his sister all the time. What do I need to do? What are the structures and systems? What are the standards and values? Because, yeah, when I learned this, my life changed astronomically, but I also realized it was the way that we'd worked many years ago with my very oppositional child in order to gain success.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the time. And I have no idea. It must be after 1 a.m. my time.
Oh my gosh, we appreciate it. We appreciate
and so I
it.
may or may not stay on much longer, because at the moment I'm all fired up, and so I'm probably need to wind down a little bit. Thank you so much again.
Appreciate it so much, Leanne.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And we'll put
ask
up your
questions in the group. Yes.
Great, and we'll put on your contact information in the group so people can get a hold of you. Thank you so very
Lovely.
much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so
I know
much
it's
for the
early.
opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, great. Now we have Monica Belton here, MSW CPTE from the Reset nonprofit, and she's going to talk to you, and she's going to talk to you about panic practice. We all have moments where we feel we might lose it. We can literally feel our hearts beating faster, muscles tense up, and breathing becomes shallow. For children during this time of pandemic and pandemonium, these times can be frightening and different to recover from. Stemming from ideology of the polyvagal theory, we will discuss what is happening in the child's brain, how that manifests in their behavior, and what to do before, after, and during the pandemic and during panic. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know what to do during the pandemic.
Right, exactly.
But watch a lot of
Sorry.
Netflix. And I think it's so perfect that I'm going after Leanne, because I think that a lot of things I had to say are going to build up what she was talking about. First of all. Second of all, I had a lot of time to mess with my my new ring light. So that was also a gift. So yes, thank you, Sabrina. Thank you for having me. My name is Monica Belton. I am a social worker, and I'm also a certified trauma professional in education. I've been working with children and families for about 19, 20 years now. So I have a lot of experience dealing with children in residential and in school settings. And the reason I was mentioning Leanne is because she was talking about those times where we are dealing with children and their anxiety and their moods. And everything that she's talking about that we now know about children is that there are no bad kids. Kids do well when they can. And so by doing things like reward systems just kind of validates to them that they're not trying hard enough, or they're not working hard enough, or they're not focused enough, when really it's their brains doing things that they just don't understand and can't control. And so that's what panic practice is about. It is about being prepared for when those times of panic come. So I do want to differentiate between panic and anxiety. So anxiety is a long-term, often associated with a medical diagnosis. So when we're talking about panic, we're talking about people who may not have a diagnosis of a panic disorder or anxiety for that matter. But panic occurs when, I don't want to ruin all the science for you because I have a slide for that. But panic occurs and can happen to anyone. They're really very common, and they can happen in isolation from having problems with anxiety. And so when we're talking about panic, we're talking about those times when our children, so definitely specifically talking about people under 18, although this is very applicable to adults as well. These children have a disruption in their routine. And so when we are talking about things like pandemic, we are talking about what panic could set in for those children who become dysregulated. And even especially speaking about the pandemic as well, we're talking about kids who are too young to go to school, but yet and still this pandemic has affected everyone's lives, including the lives of their caregivers, right? So in these times when our bodies and our brains become overwhelmed with all of the stimulus and change is when panic can occur. Now, it's really important too that you don't want to go looking for signs of panic. When panic comes, you will know. But the key is to practice. So when panic does occur, you are ready to be there, to be that second chicken. There was a study that was done involving a bunch of chickens. And what they noticed is that when a chicken first emerges from its shell, it looks around. And if the mother chicken is calm, then the chicken knows that it's safe. If the mother chicken is in any way excited, the younger chicken, without even knowing what's going on, becomes excited. And so it's important to be prepared for panic, but also it's important not to instigate it or look for it or encourage it in any way. But know that it can happen whenever someone's feelings become overwhelming for their bodies. So what does panic look like? And so this is not at all an exhaustive list of what type of things you will see. the point of this table here is just to highlight the fact that we are going to have different people at different ages showing us different types of things. So we're looking at when they're very, very young, and I put a reference at the end for an organization called 0 to 3. When we're talking about that fragile time in a person's development, we're talking about a time when they don't have a whole lot of verbalization. They don't have a whole lot of regulation. Their bodies are pretty much programmed to eat, sleep, and poop, and cry when they need something. So when you have instances where you have infants and young toddlers who become inconsolable, they need to be constantly held, they jerk up really quickly to sights and sounds or changes in the environment, you can definitely have issues of panic with young children. And it's really important to know that I'm not at all saying that this is the exhaustive list, and these same symptoms could be symptomology of another problem. So if you have any of these symptoms, you definitely want to make sure that your pediatricians are aware of what's going on when you have things that are going on that you just don't understand or don't seem typical. So from 3 to 5, when you have children who are more familiar with using their words, and maybe they have been taught those skills that Leanne was also talking about, those skills to verbalize, I feel, and they know how to understand what their bodies are going through. They can describe that they're having trouble breathing, or their muscles feel really tight, or their heart hurts. Then that's a really, really good thing and important to teach those skills ahead of time. But a lot of kids don't have that. And so what you will notice when you're dealing with situations of panic with your children are difficulty sleeping, difficulty with digestion, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. Even when they have the words, when someone is feeling panic, the part of your brain that controls language, the Broca's, is actually inhibited, and it is very difficult to access that language part of your brain when you are emotionally escalated. You also will have, especially in 3 to 5 years old, difficulty transferring attention to new activities. When a young person who is that young is experiencing panic, more than likely, they will start engaging in an activity that helps them soothe themselves. And again, this could be symptomology of other things going on too. So it's important to notice if there's been a change in stimuli, if there's been a change in environment, does somebody new come into the room? There's lots of things to take into account when you're trying to figure out what's going on. But even in time and place, there are certain things that you can use to help be that second chicken. So a little bit older, 5 to 9, is when we start seeing things that a lot of people associate with behavior problems. And this is so important because anxiety in children, when it manifests, it can very much look like a behavior problem. It can very much look like a choice almost, or even an emotional problem going on, when really it's our biological issues going on, that they're being overstimulated, overwhelmed, and the body is showing these symptoms to let you know something's going on. So by the time you have a school-age child who's between ages 5 and 9, you're going to start noticing them having difficulty focusing. They become more aggressive towards themselves or other people or even objects. They become destructive because they are having the trouble verbalizing their feelings. And then you'll also see, again, some self-soothing behaviors, and that can range from a lot of different things. When you're looking at it from a parent's point of view, you know what your children are doing when it seems that they're doing something repetitively, and it may not look typical to you, and it may sometimes even be a little disturbing to you, but they're doing it because it helps them feel better. Back to that thought that kids do well when they can. Kids have this amazing wiring in their brain that is always searching for safety. And sometimes they find that in their self-soothing activities. So when they get a little older, this is kind of stuff that when somebody has issues with panic, so out of control emotions, and it doesn't have to be constant, but the thing about panic is that you don't know when it's going to come. You know, if you are maybe have engaged in some really enlightening conversation, you may know what type of events or situations trigger you. If you're lucky enough to have that kind of awareness, that kind of people in your life that will share that kind of knowledge with you and be able to sit down and talk to you about what's going on, how you feel when you feel those things. But again, a lot of people don't. And so when you get to be a little bit older, so you're like 10 to 14 years old, you're going to notice that there's going to be some withdrawal, some emotional withdrawal. When you don't know when panic is going to set in and you don't know what to do when it does, you try to make yourself numb, and your body does that for you. You don't even have to think about it. It does that to preserve itself. So if your body is all the time trying to preserve itself and remain numb and emotionless, then you're going to look at situations where you're going to have continued difficulty focusing. You're going to have dysregulation in your body functions as well. When kids are a little bit older too, you might notice things more like the labored breathing, the increased heart rate, your body ache complaints. And that is contributed to the vagus nerve, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But once our brain starts to develop, so after age 12, when your brain synapses are really doing a good job trying to desegregate which information is important and which information is not, at that point, your hippocampus, which is the part of your brain that controls your memory and your memory of moods, when those things start to come in and your body starts to regulate itself atypically, and so certain things become a little bit more dangerous than others in our minds and emotions, is when we start to panic, and it looks more things like things that we might see traditionally in an adult who's having a panic attack. And then that has a toll, of course, on our vagus nerve, which affects our body aches and our headaches and our stomach aches. So then when you get a little older, people who have experienced panic, either for a long time or recently, when they're a little bit older, they have more access to self-medication techniques. And so you might see things like substance abuse, people who are using drugs or alcohol to try to make themselves feel better. So when we're talking, somebody had mentioned in the last segment about just trying to get your kids to survive to adulthood. Knowing and providing information about emotional stability and how to relieve yourself when you're feeling panic is so important, because kids, especially resourceful children, will find a way to make themselves feel safe. So a little bit of brain science. I don't want to bore anybody to death, but of course it's like the coolest thing in the world to me. So this is a typical brain, right? So important to note that the limbic system is the master system in your brain that is always looking for, is it safe? The feeling of panic sets in when a person does not feel safe, when they perceive something to be wrong or dangerous. So your amygdala is the part of your brain that takes in the information, your reticular activating system is the part that takes in information from all of your senses, right? So your eyes, do you see danger? Do you hear danger? Do you feel danger? Do you smell danger? Do you taste danger? What is in my food? That type of thing. And your reticular activating system is the one that sets off your amygdala that goes, danger, something is wrong. In your hippocampus, which is all part of the system, is where your emotional memories are stored. And so if you smell smoke, your reticular activating system smells smoke, your amygdala jerks up, something's wrong. Your hippocampus then tells you smoke means fire. We need to find safety. So that's like a really dramatic way of, or maybe just a really typical way for people to understand how that system works. But for somebody who suffers with panic, you can take a normal, we might perceive as a safe situation. So walking down the street, and you may hear a car squeal. Now, because in your typical developing mind, that didn't mean anything to you. But somebody who may have a memory, negative memory associated with hearing a car tire screech, their I'm sorry, my Invisalign is killing it today. Reticular activated system says car squeal, you heard it. Your amygdala says danger. Your hippocampus says, yes, we know what that means, danger. And then your body's hormones start to kick in and you go into that fight or flight. Really quickly, I want to talk about the vagus nerve. because I forgot to label it on the slide. But basically your vagus nerve is a nerve. It's a big nerve that travels from the base back of your brain down to your stomach. So when your reticular activating system says danger, one part of your vagus nerve, well, then it goes into your sympathetic nervous system, based on something Leanne was talking about earlier too. So that sympathetic nervous system is the part that tells your brain, we're going to get out of here. So we're going to flight, or it says we're going to fight. So when you hear that tire squeal, you may have panic. That part of your brain that says we need to get out of here is going to take into action. And that's when all your other brain systems get your feet moving and get you to safety. Then there's the other part of your reticular activating system, and that is your parasympathetic. And that's the part that causes you to freeze. So it's important to know this, because when we're talking about what causes panic in children, unless we do keen observations and really able to understand what is triggering that child, sometimes it's nothing. Panic has in itself a huge biological component that may be nothing at all, but the way the body is trying to regulate itself causing panic. So here's the key, is that when a child gets into panic and their brains are telling them it is not safe, the key is this. You want to get all that brain energy that's happening in that limbic system, so that little screaming molecule that I put in there. You want to get that system calmed down. And we do that by sending all of the brain's energy to the frontal lobe, which is the thinking part of the brain. So when you see this happening, so the things that we listed in the table before, when you see heavy breathing or emotional withdrawal or difficulty concentrating, and you're noticing that there's some change in the stimuli for that kid, that could be panic. So what you want to do is move that brain's focus back to the present moment. So something that Leanne was talking about as well was the long-term implications of learning mindfulness and being present. But when we're panicking, your brain cannot do that. It is stuck in trying to preserve itself. And so we have to actively implement ways to bring that focus back to the frontal lobe. How are we going to do that? This lets the child understand that they are safe. You heard a tire screech, but nobody's coming for you. They're not going to hit you with their car. It was really far away, and you're actually safe, but your body's telling you you're not. So when we bring that energy back to the frontal lobe, we can start to see, hear, smell, feel, and taste that we are safe. So what does not help, before we get into the actual actions, and I won't take up too much extra time, but what does not help is don't tell the child they are fine or tell them to breathe or relax. All right, let's breathe with me. And when I say child, I mean I've worked with kids from 3 to 18 for a very long time. So for teenagers as well, even though you think that they're more developmentally advanced, telling anybody to breathe or just relax when they are in panic is not going to help, especially when you tell somebody they're fine. You saying I'm fine doesn't make me feel any better. Yelling doesn't work. I think of that really old movie called Moonstruck with Cher, and they go, snap out of it. Madeline knows what I'm talking about. It doesn't help to help somebody snap out of a panic attack. It just makes people panic more. And of course, being the second chicken, don't panic yourself when someone else is in panic, especially when there is no foreseeable danger. And don't try to impose calm by turning off the lights or playing some really loud, what you think is soothing music. That's just going to continue the overstimulation. So very big don'ts. Don't do that. These are some really tangible, quick ideas. And if you go to my webpage at resetnow.org, reset with a C, you'll find some other ones on there under mindfulness practice or panic practice. So what we're talking about, the alphabet skip. So a child who's old enough to know the alphabet can probably do this. So when they're in the state of panic, they're highly emotional, you say, let's skip every number, say the alphabet, but skip every other letter. A. C. It makes them think, and it forces their brain's energy to go to their frontal lobe. If you practice this ahead of time, it will make more sense to them in the moment of panic. So it's important to practice it ahead of time. If you tell them while they're in panic, let the alphabet skip, and they don't know what you're talking about, it's going to create more panic. So important to practice. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're trying to get into the present moment. What's 5 things that you see? What's 4 things that you hear? What are 3 things? I always get this wrong. I have it on my saver on my phone. What's 3 things you can feel? What's 2 things you can smell? And what's 1 thing you can taste? If it doesn't, all of these things work. I don't say it doesn't work. Do it again if they need more time, because it's bringing that brain energy to the frontal lobe. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 things that you can see. 4 things you can hear. What are 3 things that you can smell? Touch, sorry. 2 things that you can smell. 1 thing you can taste. And every kid says toothpaste, and that's a wonderful thing, even though they're probably lying. Another quick one is count the lines. And I put count the lines with really anything. So if you're in a room with windows, let's count the panes on this window. 1, 2, 3. If all you have is your fingers, count the lines on your fingers. 1, 2, 3. Some of us have a lot more lines than others. If you are on a shag rug, let's count the amount of shags in this square right here. Let's go. 1, 2. Those type of really quick exercises, if you practice them ahead of time, will help in panic, bringing people back to the present moment. Asking very routine questions. What did you have for breakfast? What day is it today? What is your favorite food? Those type of things ask your brain to go to a different part of your memory, a pleasurable part of your memory, and bring back information to verbalize. So again, we're redirecting energy from one part of the brain to the next. The other ones that I have bolded here is if you do have these tools around, it's still important to practice them, but impose sensations, and these are definitely for if you have a very close relationship with someone. Putting ice cubes in their hands works. It takes a perceived danger to a real discomfort and forces the brain to re-regulate. My hands are hurting. We have to come back. We have to come back. Coloring, people being forced to stay in the lines helps refocus the brain. Repetitive movement is so important. You have to keep your bodies moving when you are in panic. Pacing actually helps. There's a reason people do that naturally. So when your brain becomes dysregulated, what you want to do is to stabilize your left and right hemisphere and its communication with each other. And you can do that by doing really repetitive moments. Even if it's rocking, you're still working on your balance. Your brain has to balance. If it's walking, you're working on your balance. Your brain has to do something physical to get out of its mental state. Remember, when you are panic practicing, so when you're taking these techniques and you're teaching them ahead of time to try to make sure that they are aware of them when it's time to use them, please remember that panic attacks are temporary. So when you're doing it in the moment, somewhere in the back of that child's mind, they know this is not going to last forever. It's going to happen. It's going to suck.
I wanted to jump in and say thank you. There's 5 more minutes. So if you,
okay.
Yes.
I have less than 5 minutes. I'm just kidding. I'll keep talking.
If anyone has any questions, maybe, or if you want to figure out what you'd like to do, wrap up, it's up to you.
Okay. So I love using mantras. So really those are mantras. And I would preface every time you go to panic practice with a kid, I would definitely repeat these things, that panic attacks are temporary. You're going to get through it, and we're going to get through it. And then recovery from a panic attack is a whole nother conversation. So I put some links up there. I don't know if there's any way for you to copy them from your screen. I know this is being recorded, so you really can just Google these things on the left side about adverse childhood experiences. So that goes even more into depth of the study of the biological implications of panic and the brain and mental health. The National Institute of Mental Health has a lot of information on there about specific panic disorder. Of course, we're not diagnosing anyone, but if you do suspect that your child is having issues with anxiety or panic specifically, there's some information on there, and definitely consult a clinician. And then I put the link up there for the 0 to 3 website. Lots of information about really young kiddos. Thank you so much for having me. Please go to my website. If you have any other questions, you can email me at info@resetnow.org, reset with the C. And I always have fun stuff on my social media, so follow me there.
Great. And I'll have your contact information on Facebook as well after we wrap up here. So thank you so
Awesome.
very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Appreciate your words and wisdom. Great. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Okay. We have a from Rachel. That was great. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you
Great.
for having me.
Thank you so very much. Okay. So we're moving on to Reverend Madeline Katz, who also happens to be my mother. Words of wisdom from this woman are great. She's a wonderful person, and I'm going to read her bio to you, or what she's planning on doing. Let's do this. Miracles flow when I let go. This session will be presented by Madeline Katz, an interspiritual minister and transformational coach. In the midst of a busy, stressful life, we often get so caught up in the mental noise and overwhelming emotion that leads us by powerful, sometimes uncontrollable impulses. It's wonderful to know that there's a simple technique to be able to center ourselves and choose to act from internal wisdom. The releasing method has proven to be powerful and effective in accessing a sense of peace and the ability to create harmony in ourselves and in our families. Join us to experience how letting go can bring peace and happiness to every area of your life. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, I just have to unmute you.
Okay.
Here you go. Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I'm just knocked out by the wisdom, the techniques, the absolute wonderful, more than tips, but really, really suggestions and ideas that you really want to spend time with, because everyone here had such important things to say, and I'm looking so much forward to Michael, to getting this this information out for everyone. Everyone's brought something beautiful. So right now, though, what I'd like to deal with is yourself. And Monica mentioned that chicken, and that's how does the first chicken take care of itself? And they're wonderful ideas, but we've talked about this in other programs. When you're feeling centered, you have an ability to kind of create that for your environment. You have an ability to create that for environment. So how do you do that? Now, this is really funny. My granddaughter, well, Sissy, was going through a tough time a few weeks ago and feeling very angry and upset. And I said, when she was just looking and sharing what she was feeling, let her express it, and then said, would you rather be happy or would you rather be angry? And didn't take her very long to choose, I want to be happy. And the sun came out on her face. That may seem like oversimplification, but children don't carry around the baggage that we have. They don't have to sort through all the past experiences, do a lot of diagnosis on what they're going through, what the past has. They're very much present moment oriented. So the idea basically of releasing, letting go, is feeling what you're feeling in the present moment. Now, the theory is And it's been proven that whatever problem you're going through, plus being upset, not good. The problem plus you being peaceful is better. And that's exactly it. So the first thing we do when we release is acknowledge and accept what's going on in the present moment, what's going on around us, what's going on within us. Is your child triggering your feelings of upset, of panic, of frustration? And as you acknowledge that, most of us don't want to be there, don't want to be in that place. So the probably counterintuitive idea is to reject those feelings. But there's a saying, what we resist persists. So if you resist acknowledging those feelings, you got yourself in a place of fighting what's going on. So what we do in releasing is accept what's going on. We don't have to describe the situation, what story we're telling ourselves. We've, matter of fact, been so bound up with describing the problem that the idea here is just going into your emotion and intercepting that stream, that constant narrative that's going on in our heads about, here this comes again, my kid is this, and I'm not equipped for this. And so it's a way of just cutting off that stress, these recycled thoughts that come to us, repetitive, unbidden. They're not really helping us. And somebody told me recently how many thoughts we have a day. Unbelievable. But the thing is, when you're releasing, you're moving away from your thoughts. And if you would do this just now with me, just take a moment and focus on what you're feeling now without a story. Got any judgments? Got any wanting to be someplace else, wanting to control any situations? And there's a demonstration that you can do. If you have a pencil handy, just grab that pencil or whatever object you might have and hold that tightly in your hand, tight as you can, and see how this causes your body to feel tense. And that's what our emotions are doing to us. Now, if you just open your hand and drop the pencil or whatever object, there's a sense of freedom there, a sense of a greater peace. And when we hold on to our problems, when we hold on to trying to figure it out, we get into this cycle of breeding more anxiety in ourselves and panic. And I love Monica's description also of panic being temporary, but we don't often recognize it when we're in the middle of it. So I like that, her idea of helping, those mantras of we're getting through this, but also there's an actual physical sensation. And can you just allow yourself to be wherever you are at this moment? I'm feeling miserable. Can you accept that? I'm feeling frustrated. Just welcoming that.
Can I just interrupt for a second? I'm so sorry.
Sure.
I hear someone typing and it looks like everyone's on mute, so I'm not sure who's typing. Someone is. If you could just mute yourself, that'd be great. Thanks so much.
Okay. Okay. And well, this example with the pen or whatever object, you can see that it's really not attached to you. it's really not attached to you. And in the same way, we've become so identified with our feelings that we say, I am angry, I am sad, I am, that we believe that to be our identity. Now, if it were our identity, we would feel it all the time. It wouldn't be a sometimes thing. One of my wonderful mentors used to say, feelings are like the weather. They come and they go. But we can begin to see ourselves as we witness this as the sky with clouds coming and going. Even if we don't like what's coming and going, how our kids are acting, just accepting it, we can find a sense of freedom in that. We can find that we're able to let go in that. When we realize that who we are underneath all of this is unchanging, no matter what's going on, there is an identity there that is not affected. And that is, somebody mentioned before, mindfulness. We can recognize whatever's going on as thoughts and feelings. We can release, we can let go of. And in the same way that we could let go of that pen, it's all about wanting. And what we want usually is approval. And it can be very frustrating. I think Susan and her partner did an exercise in the beginning with a child. I don't like you. Huh. How does that make you feel? A child, I don't like you, I don't want you to be here, makes us feel maybe unloved, unaccepted, unacceptable. Can we let go of wanting, just the wanting, of to be understood, to be accepted, to be okay, even wanting that kind of love and approval from ourselves? Right now, maybe think of somebody whose approval you want, even your own, or somebody whose acceptance you want, even your own. Can you open to just letting that go, that sense of wanting? Wanting is a sense of lack. So can you just allow that sense of lack to leave? How would it feel if you never wanted, never had that clutchy feeling of wanting someone's approval? How would it feel? And just open to that sense of freedom. Now, if there's a situation in your life, your kids being out of control, and we're fighting to control them, we have all these wonderful techniques. But if this sensation is going on us, on inside of us, of that longing, that wanting to control, whether it's kids, whether it's the bus driver, whether it's the weather, whether it's whatever's going on in our world of experience, how would it feel if you let go of that wanting sensation, that sense of lack? Remembering that you're not letting go of the ability to control. You're letting go of that contraction, that constricted feeling, that fight inside. Can you just take a moment and allow that to leave easily, effortlessly? When you do that, you have control. There's a difference between wanting and having. And if you could take a moment and just be in the moment without letting a whole bunch of stories run through your head, and just sense into that emotion and even welcome that emotion. Therein lies your freedom, freedom to act from wisdom and inspiration rather than act on impulse and with this limited clutching feeling. And the third want that we talk about in releasing is safety. And that feeling of being unsafe can happen to us often when our kids are out of control or we're feeling worried about their safety. And that sense of wanting is like a carrot in front of our nose that we can never reach. Always keeps us in a state of want. But if we could just allow that sense of wanting to leave, we move into having. Would you rather want safety or have it? I think you know. And very often, many of us go through this sense of cognitive thinking, cognitive distortions, this all or nothing. We look at things in absolute black or white, that our children are difficult, our children are troublemaking, we don't know how we're going to get through this. This is just awful. And even though these things are momentary, they tend to get into our thinking. So to recognize that all or nothing, things are either awful or wonderful. And our awareness, identifying more with our awareness of the situation, rather than being caught up in the situation, leads to great freedom. And when we're in a moment where things are stressing us, there's this mental filter where we dwell on the negatives. Can you take a moment now, whatever you're thinking, and go to the space between your thoughts? We tend to think we're our thoughts. They also come and go. We also fortune tell. We jump to conclusions. We assume very often and predict things based on, this is going to turn out badly. My kid is going to be wind up in detention, have trouble in school. My child is going to, we don't have to project that. And when we're aware of what's going on inside us, we can pause and reflect and see that that's just a repetitive idea that we can hook onto or allow to leave. The greatest discovery, I think, of all mankind is that we have a choice, but very often we don't exercise that in our thinking. Things come up for us and we just automatically accept them, rather than be the observer, the witness of what's going on. And there's one teacher who says, is that 100% true? And you don't have to believe it if it's not 100% true. And that happens very often in this kind of repetitive thinking. We also criticize ourselves or our kids with shoulds, musts, ought tos, and have to. They're not acting up to snuff the way I feel. When we're living in the moment, we don't have all of those projections. So they're not fighting. We're not fighting with an expectation that may be completely unreal. And we label ourselves and our kids with, I'm a bad mother, this is a bad kid, my kid always this, always. We can step back from that with the recognition that this is a temporary situation. And we blame ourselves when the kids aren't acting perfectly. What have I done wrong? First of all, there's no such thing as perfect. It's a mathematical concept. And accepting what is going on right now in front of us leads to a sense of freedom. The child, somebody put it beautifully, whatever they're acting on is expressing some need that they have, rather than having to label them as acting out. What are they asking for? What do they need? And it's good often to spend some time. I know it's hard to be busy to do this when you're such busy parents, but to take time away from the situation and look at what your negative thoughts are. Look at them and be able to let them go in the same way that you would let go of that pencil. Who's in charge of your mind? Who does your thinking? You're in control of what you're thinking, and very often we surrender it in our panic and sense of something that's learned. Leanne talked about this. Her mother didn't know how to deal with a child who was super active, super whatever. I have to admit my parents didn't either. So there was a lot of harshness. And very often that harshness that comes out on our children is because we're being harsh with ourselves. I shouldn't do this. I should be better. This shouldn't be happening. There's an expression which I love, don't should on yourself. Get rid of those shoulds. And you can look around in your environment. I loved what Monica said, choosing objects right now to bring you into the present moment, to stop that ceaseless mental chatter. You could just allow the mental chatter to be there and witness it without getting involved. My daughter had a dog that she brought home to me, Fifi, and Fifi was yipped and yapped at everything. A little Yorkie, and they're very yippy. And that's how my mind seems sometimes, and many of our minds, that constant yipping at a shadow. There's nothing under the bed, there's no monster, but whatever in our environment triggers us, we start that. And we can lovingly say to ourselves, shh, shh. That's not something I have to react to. And give ourselves that space between what's going on and what the actuality is, and how we tend to bring all of our past experiences into the present moment. And based on that, we project what the future is going to be. So this kind of present moment idea that's getting much more attention in all modalities now is absolute freedom. And to just breathe brings us back to this moment. And when we breathe, a conscious breath, don't have to do a deep one, don't have to do a low breath, just be conscious of it at this moment. And if I could ask you now to take 3 breaths just with awareness. how nourishing that is, and how to see that at the end of those breaths, a new one comes in. We don't have to struggle for the next breath.
Reverend Madeline,
Yes,
I'd like to just give you a heads up, 5 more minutes.
thank you. So that breathing, we don't have to struggle for the next breath. And when we're in the witnessing mode and in the present moment, we don't have to struggle for what we'll do next. We have all these wonderful techniques that we've learned today that we can choose when we're in that mode after bringing ourselves to a peaceful place. And even when everything's going haywire in our houses and around us, there's always time to pause. Can't take 3 breaths? Take 1. Just a mindful breath. And let go. Acknowledge what's going on and let it pass. Breathe into this moment and you're nourishing yourself. I don't need my full 5 minutes. I'm so anxious to hear Kristen and Michael that I'm going to just say thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And your all being here is just evidence of what wonderful parents you are.
Although, Madeline, did you see that you have a comment from Rachel in the chat?
Oh, I hadn't seen it.
I struggle with embarrassment with how my kids are acting in front of other people. I think because I feel judgment from other parents for not controlling. How would you address it in yourself?
Okay, thanks, Kristen. I wasn't, and thanks for that question. Yeah, so here we go. Can you bring to mind, we'll do this quickly, that feeling of embarrassment, that feeling of judgment, and open to how that feels. Just as difficult as it seems, could you just take a moment and welcome that, the feelings, let go of the story at the moment and just move into how that feels. And welcome it, embrace it lovingly. And see that that feeling right now, is that wanting approval? Is it wanting control? Is it wanting safety? And sometimes it's a mix of all of it. And whatever it is, whatever that is, could you just allow that wanting to leave? See how it feels in your body and just breathe in. Is the tension in your neck, in your chest? And let your thoughts do what they're doing, but focus on your body sensation and just lovingly welcome it. And allow that wanting to control it, the wanting approval, the wanting the safety. Just open. There's a gesture of just opening and let it go. And let it go. And could you in this moment and that moment just give yourself an ocean of love, your own approval, your own acceptance. Somebody said early on, people can't make you feel bad. It's an Eleanor Roosevelt quote. No one can make me feel bad unless I allow them to. So this is about taking control of your own inner self, your own inner wisdom, which all of this is going on in your head. what people are thinking of you, what they're thinking of your kids. And you can choose to let that blah, blah go when you're immersed in self-love, and just let that wash over you, wave after wave. And that's who you are, that loving center. I hope this has been helpful, and Sabrina will put up my details.
Great.
In positive thinking.
Definitely will. Thank you, Reverend Madeline.
You, much love.
Great. So next we have Kristen Mozeiko, and she is going to do something called the Alexander technique. You can improve how you breathe. Breathing is on everyone's mind as people ask, how can I maintain respiratory health during the pandemic? Learn how Alexander's techniques, respiratory re-education, supports wellness and stress reduction, letting you take charge of your well-being. In this online class, you will develop awareness of your own breathing habits, learn techniques, and receive information supported by the latest science for improving health and functioning and lowering anxiety in today's world. Explore Alexander breathing to recharge as you work in your home and office, reduce stress, improve sleep, adapt to wearing masks, and more. This class is open to students of all levels of Alexander technique experience, including those new to the technique. Maximize your ability to breathe well, walk away with practical tools and calming practices that you can use at home. Everyone will need a place to lie down on the floor and should come prepared to lie down on a carpet or yoga mat. So I hope everyone can do that. Great. Thank you for joining us, Kristen.
Happy to be here, Sabrina. That was great, Madeline. Thank you. Sabrina, would you mind just making me co-host so I can do a little screen share here? Is that all right? Oh,
okay, I don't see the 3 dots on your screen. Hold on one second. I'm going to change it.
You go to the participants tab. And
I got it. Sorry, I'm getting familiar.
Yeah.
Okay, make co-host. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, one of my students, I teach, like I said, something called the Alexander technique. And one of my students was asking me if I had seen the Biden speech, and this is not political, but I'd just like everyone to take a look at your screen for a minute if you've looked away, and just watch and tell me what you notice happening. The sound is turned off, but notice what happens when he's speaking. Yeah, he's pointing his finger, but now something is about to happen. And what did you see? What did you notice happening there? You can go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll stop the share there. What did you all notice? You can just go ahead and unmute yourself if you noticed, if you're participating actively. Did anyone notice the direction of his spine going up? So he was doing something like this, and then he stopped for a minute and he came up. And if you are in a place where you can enable your video, I might be able to give you some personal feedback about what I'm seeing and how we can sit. Also, by sitting well, by standing well, and by having good posture, we're going to breathe better. But if you've been sitting in front of your computer or you're lounging on a couch, I just want you to bring attention to how you're sitting in this moment. So right here, we have 2 sit bones at the bottom of our pelvis, right? And when we're sitting, we want to be balanced on those 2 bones. And I'm sure that there are parents out there who notice their kids kind of doing this or this and developing bad habits. And the most important thing that I can tell you, I've worked with a lot of parents, is to be a good model. And how can you be a good model for your children is to use good posture yourself and to treat yourself well. In a minute, we're gonna all lie down, and I'm gonna do another quick screen share. When we lie down, I want you to, if you can, find a clear spot on the floor. And by the way, This is great to do if you have babies and you're doing floor time with the babies, because a lot of my parents, you know, they're always like, oh, I'm always carrying this kid, you know, they're so heavy and my shoulders, and this is why I slouch. And I say, well, I can understand, I get it, but when the babies are on the floor doing floor time, join them. But instead of being on your belly, turn to your back. Let me see if I can find this link here. So if you haven't done so already, again, I'd encourage you to find a spot on the floor and to put a couple of books underneath your head, not your neck. And what you want to do is to go into the semi-supine position. So lying down on the floor, you're going to look kind of like this. And, you know, and your little one might be crawling over you, and that's okay. That's really okay. So again, see if you can find your place on the floor. And I'm just going to guide you through what we call a guided lie down. And we're going to talk a little bit about breathing. But before we do, just notice when I said breathing, what happened. You started to become just a little bit more aware of your breathing. And you might have taken in a breath. So in the little opening that Sabrina supplied, right now, a lot of us are concerned about respiratory health with everything that's been going on with the coronavirus. So one of the things that we talk about is breathing in through the nostrils and out through the mouth, right? Or in and out through the nostrils. But we're going to focus on the nostrils because when you're breathing in through the nostrils, you're getting even more oxygenated, which is really, really important right now. Also, in your nose, you have these little hairs and cilia that when you breathe in, it cleans and it filters the air that you're breathing. So I'd like everyone right now, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and lie down in this semi-supine position. You're going to want to put a couple of books underneath your head right there. And just allow your whole back to open up onto the floor. And right now, you don't really need to be looking at the camera so much. But again, I'm going to just guide you through. And just notice, are you breathing right now? Are you holding your breath? And are your lungs full, half full, or nearly empty? When we're in an anxious state, we tend to breathe way up here. I call this upper thoracic breathing. It's like we just finished a race. Stress can do the same thing. So when you're lying down, and if you put your hands gently across your torso, what you might feel is your belly start to move up and down a little bit. You might feel your ribs opening up along your sides. So see if you can just get a sense of that right now. But instead, and this is the trick, and this is what I'd like everyone to remember when you walk out of here today, before you initiate your breath, start with an out breath. Because a lot of us have been educated and taught we need to breathe in first. But actually, if we expel all of our air first, if we let it all out, close our lips, breathe back in through our nostrils, we're going to get a much fuller and deeper breath. Now, how do we get a deeper breath? Well, again, if you're lying down right now, you actually sometimes need to take in a little bit more breath through your nostrils, but you also need to start to notice, am I gripping in my shoulders? So I'd like everyone just to bring your attention to your shoulders. Because if you're squeezing your shoulders and you try to breathe in, you can't get much breath in there. In your shoulders, there's your collarbone. Underneath your collarbone is your first rib. And under your first rib is lung tissue. So as you breathe in, allow your ribs to open up. And let your breath out. Start with an out breath. And like you're blowing out a candle. Close your lips when you get to the end of the out breath. Breathe back in through the nostrils and feel the breath moving up into the head area. Opening up, and then once again, let the breath out like you're blowing out the candle. Good. And on your out breath, did you squeeze? On your in-breath, did you squeeze? And so start to get curious about what's happening with you right now with your breathing. Do you compress yourself? If so, could you just simply let that go? And for some of us, when we have these chronic patterns of tension, that can be a little bit more difficult. But when you're lying down, and for those of you who came in a little bit late, I would just encourage you to lie down right now in this position. It's a real opportunity for your low back to release back, for your neck, the cervical vertebrae, to release back as well. And as they release and they undo, you'll start to feel your whole back starting to open up. So right now, I want you to bring your attention to your arms. Now, I'm an aunt of 7 nieces and nephews, and some of them were triplets. And so I spent a lot of time carrying them. And I know my arms would get really, really tired and my shoulders would get pulled down and forward. So, but when you're lying down like this, gravity starts to take over and opens up the fronts of your shoulders. And you can just allow the breath to move in. And this work is very similar to what Reverend Madeline was talking about. It's a letting go process. It's a peeling away. It's working through negation. So if you feel your arms right now, and I'd just encourage everyone to feel into your arms and your hands. See if you can unsqueeze. So I'm holding a fist right now for those of you who can't see the camera. I'm holding a fist really tightly. And as you start to release the fist, think about those fists being in your upper shoulders, letting go, in your neck and in your back, that opening up through the back. And allow the breath to move in through the nostrils and out through the mouth. So I'm going to introduce you now to something called the whispered ah. So this is a controlled exhalation that was developed by F.M. Alexander, Frederick Matthias Alexander, who's the founder of the Alexander technique. And he was originally known as the breathing man. For those of you who are familiar with the technique, it's also has to do with posture, how you move, how you interact. But a lot of people come to me because they need help with their posture because they've got back pain. But right now, more and more people are coming to see me for this respiratory re-education, knowing and understanding that we could be breathing a little bit better than we are. So with the whispered ah, I'd like everyone right now to think of something slightly funny. Maybe it was something silly that your child did that makes you laugh just a little bit. And go ahead and yawn. And you could feel the space in the back of your mouth just kind of opening up. And that's the soft palate opening up. And you'll also notice as you start to think of something slightly funny, your eyes will start to lift. Your face muscles will start to lift. And you'll now have a little more space in your oral cavity to let out an AH whispered ah. When you get to the end of the breath, close your lips. Breathe back in through your nostrils. Noticing as you breathe in a sense of expansiveness throughout your body. And then again, breathe out, open your mouth, let your jaw release away. Because I'm sure some of you deal with jaw tension, that's stress related. So let your jaw melt away. And if you do this for at least 4 times a week for 15 minutes, before you say, I don't have that kind of time, you can breathe anywhere. You can do this anywhere. You can do this while you are grocery shopping, working, anything, in front of the computer, holding a child. If you can do this for 15 minutes, 4 times a week, it's actually been proven to lower blood pressure. And while we can't make any health claims per se, there has been research that backs this up, these controlled exhalations. And I recommend doing these as often as you can. And again, it's breathing out with the AH for the duration of the breath, closing your lips when you get to the end of the breath, breathing back in through the nostrils, and then again out through the mouth. And what you'll start to notice is your stress levels are going to come down. And this is really the exciting part. And I don't know if any of you have dealt with COVID at all, but what happens with the breathing too with COVID is people start to limit their breathing and when they've been on their back. So sometimes it's good to go onto your side to do this, to go onto your front to let this part open up. But it's really just getting these full breaths, which allows for the intercostal muscles. These are the muscles in between the ribs to start to open up. And we're really asking the whole rib cage, and these are the ribs in my hands right now, to open up as we breathe in and as we breathe out. So we'll do this one more time together. Breathe out on an AH. Get to the end of the breath, close your lips. Breathe back in through your nostrils. Thinking of something slightly funny, let your jaw release open. See if you can release your neck while you do this. Release your shoulders and your whole back. And notice what part of your body is gripping or clenching. And see if you can just allow that to undo and to let go. So this is a really basic activity. Again, this is called the whispered ah. It's a controlled exhalation. And so far what we've talked about is the importance of breathing in through the nostrils to not only cleanse the breath, but also to give you greater oxygenation. We've talked about the importance of posture and staying upright. Because if I am right now, I'm over my computer and I'm crunching down, I'm putting a lot of pressure on this part of my back. And if you are crunching down, you can put a hand on your back and you can feel the tightness of those muscles. But like I showed you with that little Biden video, you can think lengthening up through your spine, coming up, and allow the breath to give you that sense of widening across the back. And as you need, like you can hear, my voice just shifted because I allowed myself to come up out of that collapsed position. So I would love to hear your questions if you have any questions. And also, if you put your camera on, I might be able to give you some feedback. If not, I can also share with you some questions that I typically get from parents if that's useful. But the floor is open. And all right, so I don't see anyone raising their hand. I do see, this is great. So someone just said, I'm currently breastfeeding. Rachel wrote this. What are some typical questions? So I've been working with a woman who has 4 children, and I went to her house, and this was what we worked on for probably 10 minutes. So now there are some of those pillows that are out there. You don't need a special pillow because for her, just that, I think it's called My Breast Friend, the pillow that kind of comes around like a tube around the body was too low for her baby. So what we did, so notice my posture right now. I'm coming up through my spine this way, and I'm not doing this. What my student was doing was feeding her baby like this. Her shoulders were pulled up and her head was crouching down and over, and she was wondering why she was having severe shoulder pain. So what I recommend that you do is get a bunch of pillows and make a support on your lap to lift the baby up to you so you're not going down to the baby. I hope that answers your question there. For those of you who have children that you start to notice that their posture does not look very good. You notice them doing this, or they're sitting down in front of the couch and their knees are kind of pointing out this way. That's also a question that I get. And first of all, when I say sit up straight, Notice how that feels to you. It's not a really nice way to tell your kids to have better posture. We didn't like hearing it in school. It usually created some form of rigidity on the inside. So I worked a lot with kids and I said, I want you just to simply lengthen up through your spine. This is your head. It's like a flower and it's going up toward the sun. And suddenly you get these kids that are walking around with a much better posture. And why is this a better posture? Well, our head is about 10 to 12 pounds. And when it comes forward like this, we start to shape all of what's happening up here. Now this can't cure osteoporosis, but what it can do is help everyone to find freedom in a more balanced posture and where we are. So I'll mention the flower. As a parent, though, you need to keep getting creative when you notice your young one using poor posture. So sometimes right now there's a lot of homeschooling going on and being in front of the computer a lot. So I'd invite everyone right now to notice the distance between the computer screen and the back of your head and to feel the space. Now this is a little more tricky to do with children, so make sure every 20 minutes you set a little alarm and you tell them, just get up, go run around, and then come back to the computer. Make sure you're planning ahead those breaks for them, because they get absorbed and they start to look more and more like this. And we are creating right now these postural habits that these children are going to have for life. And that's not to put more pressure or more burden on any of you. But again, just as a recap, see if you can just come back to your own posture to be that model for the children, right? But also to give them tips and tricks on how to be thinking about it. So with my little niece, she was doing something really kind of strange with her body to get at something. And I just gently allowed her shoulder to come out and I guided with her hands. And then she was like, oh, that feels, and I said, does that feel better when I do that with you? So I just simply moved her arm in a way that she had maybe never experienced before. And you can do this with children if they're using themselves poorly. You could just put a gentle hand on them and say, see if you can put a hand on their back, a gentle hand on the back, and say, see if you can come up. And to use your touch. Right now, a lot of us aren't getting touched very much, right, during COVID. A lot of us are in isolation. A lot of people are in isolation. So that extra touch is also really, really important. How am I doing with time, Sabrina? And again, the floor is open if you have any other questions.
We have 8 minutes.
Oh, okay. We have a little bit more time. Now, I would love to work more with people, but I feel like I would need to see them in order to respond. So if there's anyone brave enough to put their camera on, I can work with you with or without sound, but just to work with some basic chair posture. So in the beginning, we talked about, Biden and coming up through your spine. And right here, here's a little guy. And we were talking about feeling into your sit bones, right in through here. And noticing right now that your feet are making contact with the floor. So one of the things that typically happens is people tend to pull the feet underneath them. We cross our legs, right? And we do all kinds of funky things. So I'd invite people who are sitting right now to go ahead and cross your legs and notice how that tilts your pelvis. So a lot of people come to me, like I mentioned, with back pain. And when you twist your pelvis, or people who have recently had a child, the ligaments in your body are going to get looser to make sure that the baby can go out. And with that joint laxity or that ligament laxity, the looseness, it's really easy to kind of throw your back out a little bit, sometimes a lot. It's really much easier to throw your back out. So at the beginning, we talked about lying down like this can sometimes just let the back settle and to allow the bones of the back to resettle, which takes some of the pressure off of the intervertebral discs. So we have discs in our spine. So by having that contact with the floor, you can feel your feet underneath you, right? So, and feel your head balancing on top of your spine. So take your 2 fingers and put them behind your earlobes right here. And what I'd like everyone to do is just gently nod your head like this. Now, what some people are doing is this, and we don't want this. We want to be looking down from up here. Our children are typically below us, right? And what do we do when the child is at a lower spot than us? We tend to drop down to them. Instead, as you stand and you look down, can you look down from up here? Looking down from here versus looking down from here. And just nod if that's making some sense to those of you who are watching. Yeah, it's this idea, can I stay up to come down? So in the Alexander work, sometimes I'll work with people lying down, and I'll also work with people sitting at a chair. And when we're working at a chair, some common postures that I see, right? Sitting down, people do things like this to sit down. And again, just to do that once is not a big deal, but we typically start to do and make these habitual patterns that affect how we use our bodies in the long run. So I just wanted to give you a little bit more on the sitting and being in front of the posture, and I'm going to offer you one more thing. If you have a mask around, I would invite you to bring out your mask without putting it on yet. But if you do have a mask nearby, it's Jean Brody recently wrote an article in the New York Times, and she was talking about the importance of respiratory re-education, which is what we've been talking about a lot today. And she recommends, and I think it's great, before you put your mask on, do at least 5 controlled exhalations. Because I'm willing to bet there's some of you that struggle to wear a mask, that find it difficult to breathe. I've heard that a couple times. And this is just a regular surgical mask, and it's the second most effective mask to an N95 mask. It's the second most effective. The third would be some of those cotton masks. The masks with the valves are appropriate if you're out in California. And
Kristen, just wanted to give you a little heads up, less than 4 minutes.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
The valves on the mask, they're great if you're dealing with smoke inhalation, but not with a virus. So if you have an N95 mask with a valve, it's not as effective actually as this mask or as a regular cotton mask. So before you put your mask on, let's all just go through this process of breathing out 5 times. Close your lips when you get to the end of the breath, breathe back in. Close your lips when you get to the end of the breath, breathe back in. And just as a reminder, you're going to do this 3 more times. You're going to let your jaw release away. You're going to release your neck as you do this. So you're not breathing out like this. You're feeling the space between yourself and the camera, thinking of something slightly funny to give that lift in your soft palate and around your eyes. And then when you feel ready, you'll put the mask on your face like this. And the first thing that you want to notice is, how does this make me feel wearing a mask? And I'm willing to bet there are many of you that start to feel maybe a little anxiousness. I've taught a class with this, and I'm going to be teaching another one this fall on breathing. I'm doing a 5-week class, and we're going to talk even more about the mask and what this stirs up in us. Because if we're feeling anxious with the mask, we're going to be breathing higher, and we're going to be less attentive of ourselves and our surroundings. So when you get the mask on, you're going to then do those 5 controlled exhalations one more time, because it takes a minute or 2 to get yourself regulated, to get your breathing regulated to the mask. Some people put it on, they're like, I can't stand it. Well, you haven't given yourself enough time yet. Take those 5 breaths, do it, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, nice controlled exhalations. And what you'll start to realize is, oh, I can still breathe. And this is fine. And there's been a couple of bits of misinformation out there about masks. And one of the questions that came up one time, is the breath that I'm breathing back in bad for me? And the answer to that is no. So right now, everyone breathe out and then breathe back in. That breath was in there. So you're always dealing with breath that's in your system. And doctors will wear some of these at 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours all day long. And they've never had any negative health impacts from that. Now, from what I've read, if you have a child that is less than 2 years old, you should not be masking your child. But it is important to ask your child, do you need to take a break from the mask? Bring them to an area where they can take the mask off for a minute. And in this hot weather, sometimes they get sweaty. Wipe some of the sweat off and then tell them to take a couple of deep breaths and then put the mask back on and to take a couple of deep breaths with the mask on. And this is going to help them to become more comfortable with the mask and to know that it just takes a minute or two. You just have to be patient.
Thank you so much.
All I have, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Learned a lot, and this time we needed to hear that. Thank you so very much.
Thanks.
And I guess you'll leave your contact information. Do you want to speak quickly about that, or?
Sure. I'm going to be, I think it's in September. I think it's September 11th. I'm going to be starting a course, a breathing course, and I'll put the information in the chat and I'll share it with Sabrina.
Thanks so very much. Wonderful.
Super.
Thank you.
You're on.
Sabrina, you're muted.
Thanks for letting me know. I'm introducing Michael Larson. He's a parenting and relationship coach, and I wanted to, did I say I'm interviewing? I'm introducing. Okay. He is the parent coach and co-founder of Life Upgrade. He's a BA in CC, and he's focusing on the parent-child relationship and learning effective strategies to strengthen connection and build a healthy relationship with your child. Thanks so much for joining us, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
All right, well, I've been sitting here in and out of the room to get and listening to all the great speakers so far. It's been great. What's awesome is on a forum, I guess, when there's so many different people that it all kind of ties together. So a lot of the stuff I heard about breathing, and I heard about the parent-child relationship and emotions and with trauma, it all made sense to me. I find myself just nodding along and okay, so it's really, really good. And so yes, I'm gonna focus on the parent-child relationship. So as we know as a parent, there is so many things that we are worried about. We're worried about making money, paying the bills, making meals, having a clean house, getting our kids to activities, doing this, balancing everything, and it's very overwhelming. And then we wanna worry about the pet, we wanna worry about our relationship with our partner. And then we have to worry about our children. And within focusing on our children, again, there's so many things that we tend to worry about or we're anxious about. Are they healthy? What are they eating? Are they sleeping well enough? Do they have friends? Do they have positive friends? Do they have a girlfriend or a boyfriend? Is that a positive relationship? So a list goes on, a list goes on of all these things we have to focus on or have to put our energy into. And what I wanted to talk about today is like all those things, and some of them are very important, some are still important. But if we focus our energy on our parent-child relationship, if we focus on what we can control, which is ourself, a lot of those things that I just mentioned are uncontrollables. So a way to, as a parent, to reduce anxiety, to reduce stress, to focus on what we can control opposed to what we can't control. So within the parent-child relationship, the most important question to ask is, how does your child respond to you? Do they emotionally react to you, or do they respond to you? And if there's lots of emotion reaction, you want to dig deep into that and try to figure out what is going on there. So within the relationship, how is the connection? Does your child feel safe coming to you when they have a problem? Or do they feel like you're going to criticize them? Do they feel like you're going to respond to them? So that is the important things to focus on in the relationship. Children's behavior is not random. I talk about that a lot, is there's always a meaning behind behavior. And as a parent, we need to figure out what the why is. And quite often behind the behavior is a child trying to get their needs met. Depending on the age, they might not be able to verbalize what needs are trying to be met. Even as when they're older, they still might not have those skills. So look deep into the behavior to try to see what's going on there. And often there's a disconnect in the parent-child relationship. So how do we do this as parents? So I'm talking about focusing on the parent-child relationship. We want a healthy, a secure, a safe parent-child relationship. So first of all, we want to look at our parenting style. And generally, we pick up our parenting style from our parents, even if we didn't necessarily like how we were parented, or we pick it up from our uncles or aunts. It's kind of passed down generational, or we might see something on Google, or we see a video and we just kind of wing it as parents. Nobody goes to parenting school. We go to high school, we go to university, we go to college, but there's no parenting education. So often we just develop a parenting style. Within parenting styles, there's generally kind of broken down to 4. So there's a permissive parenting style where you're more of a friend. You lack the ability to give structure, put in firm limits. You struggle with instituting safety, structure, and rules in your home. So that's there's a second type of parenting style where you're uninvolved, which means that you're quite busy. You're always working. You're kind of always pushing your children away, saying, I'm busy, I'll get to you. You take your children to activities, different things, but at the dinner table, you're not really present. So you're not necessarily that involved as a parent. A third style is authoritarian. So this is where we, like, as a parent, just want obedience. We want our child to just kind of shut up and listen. Everything we say is the way it goes. Just do what we tell you. We don't really want any secrets in this relationship. We want to know everything that's going on in their life. And we're very authoritative in like an authoritarian kind of way. And lastly, the parenting style of assertive. So assertive is where we are nurturing, we're warm, we provide a safe, secure relationship, but we also couple that with putting in firm limits, rules, and boundaries, because we let our children know that our job as a parent is to teach them. We need to teach them skills, life skills, social skills, emotional regulation skills that will guide them through life. So we put limits in place in terms of safety and structure. We include the child in the decision making. We let their voice be heard. So that's assertive style. And I encourage all parents to be an assertive parent. Obviously, we can fall into all these different styles depending on what's going on, if emotions take over. But if we can fall back to assertive parenting style, that's really going to help the parent-child relationship. So our child is trying to get their needs met. So I mentioned earlier, behavior is not random. Every child wants to know, do I matter? Am I seen? Am I heard? Am I respected? Am I valued? Not only do your children want to know that, we all want to know that as well in all our human interactions, in all our human relationships. We want to know those 4 things. So if you can focus on filling those needs for your child, that is really when you're going to see behavior change. You're going to see them open up to you more. You're going to have more conversations opposed to trying to figure out the behavior. The behaviors are going to kind of change when you meet those 4 needs. So you look at your parenting style, you look at meeting your children's 4 needs. How can you meet those needs? And also a very important thing is a teamwork approach. So you and your child working together. There's no such thing as a bad parent or a bad child. There might be a problem or an issue that we view as bad or negative, whatever word you want to use. But if you work together as a team and try to remove this problem or issue, so if you separate it from the child, if you separate it from you as a parent, it lowers emotions. Our guards go down, and you can sit down together with your child and look at the problem issues. So if they're not following a rule, if they're doing this and you want to do something different, you work as a team. Obviously, as the parent, you are the leader as the team. But if you give your children a voice, if you let them have a say when you're coming up with house expectations, when you're talking about different things, before you say no, you let them have a chance to speak the reasons why they want this. Before you say no, you let them know why you're going to say no. That teamwork approach is going to make things so much easier, opposed to just trying to control what your child does, because your child doesn't want to be controlled. And if they are letting you control them, they might be trying to please you, so that leads to issues as well. So yes, life is stressful. Currently now with the pandemic, it's very, very stressful. So any ways we can kind of look to lower the stress is very, very important. When we don't work as a team with our child, I just mentioned that we end up butting heads and we end up in power struggles with our children. And to avoid power struggles, we need to just open the space to let our children speak. We need to give space for their emotions. So often when there's things that are said in an emotionally reactive way by a parent to a child, or a child says something to us that is in an emotional reactive way, like we mentioned earlier, I think one of the speakers talking about, I don't like this person or I don't like you, hurt feelings happen. And in all my years of working with children, parents, and families, what's evident to me and in my personal life is that hurt people hurt people. And what I mean by that is if we have some emotional pain, if we have something going on within us and we're dysregulated and we're feeling some type of way, we might take that out onto somebody without even that being that person's fault that we feel that way. Or we might take it out on our safe person, which quite often is our parent or our partner, right? We take our stuff out on them. They might fire back and take their stuff out on us. And then all of a sudden we said something, they've said something, and we've hurt each other. So it's almost like we've hurt. It's like a cycle. So we have to slow down. We need to let our child know when we've made a mistake. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I was emotional, I was stressed out, I took it out on you. And it's, I don't like necessarily what you did, but the way I reacted was not okay. And I apologize. And just like you, I have a brain, and sometimes I'm in my little brain where I'm emotional, my amygdala, and sometimes I'm in my big brain when I'm thinking. So we role model to our children that we all can make mistakes. And out of anger or stress, things can happen. So if this sounds familiar to you, if you're a parent listening to this and you're like, okay, like this is kind of what happens with me and my kids or with me and my partner, it's okay. It's never too late to hit a giant reset button. And that's what I do when I work with parents. Like, let's hit a reset button and let's figure out how to make some changes, what we can control. We can't control the past, but we can apologize. We can go to our children and say, the way I've been parenting and the way I've been doing things haven't been the best. And I didn't really know any other way. So I was always trying my best because I love you. And I was trying to get certain results, but I wasn't going about it the right way. So I'm going to be trying some things differently. I'm going to ask for your patience. I'm going to ask for you to work with me as a team. And we're going to try to figure out how to remove these problems and issues that are in the home. Because I know that you want to feel happy. I want to feel happy. So there's ways that we can do that. So you hit a reset button, you kind of call a family meeting, and you discuss the new plan, and it's never too late to undo things that happened. So as I sit here, I'm not telling you to accept your child's negative behavior. I'm not telling you to accept them if they say rude things to you, or if they break something, or if they hit something. I'm just encouraging you to look past the behavior. Like I said earlier, separate the child from the behavior. There's a reason why that happened. There's a reason why they did that. It's not the best way that they did that, but when you uncover that, when you go deep into that, then you can work with your child to give options, alternatives to behavior. Every child naturally wants to have a parent who is proud of them. It's just ways to help children figure out how to do things. So when it comes down to a lot of what I'm talking about, it comes down to emotions. It comes down to how to respond to our emotions, because without the ability to feel pleasurable emotions like happy, joy, excitement, we also we need to feel the painful emotions such as anger, sadness, fear. So we can't not feel emotions. So what do we have to do? We have to learn what to do with emotions. We heard lots of good stuff today about breathing, about letting it come, looking into our thoughts. And as a parent, I encourage you to invest into researching about what emotions are, self-regulation, how to co-regulate with our children. Because if you're like me and you grew up in the 80s and 90s or before that, nobody was talking about emotions. Nobody was teaching us about emotions. When I was in school, if I did something that was bad, I was punished. When I go home, my parents would punish me again. So basically, if I acted out at school, I was trying to tell somebody something without saying it that I was emotionally dysregulated, but then I got punished at school, I got punished at home. So what happened was I felt worse. I felt more angry, and the emotional cycle continued. So it is up to us to learn about emotions so we can self-model behavior for our children. Our children are watching us. Often, depending on the age, more than just listening to us, they're watching us. So at a young age, 0 to 7, 0 to 8, science shows that the child's brain is like a sponge. They're picking up everything going on around them. How are the parents interacting? How are my siblings interacting? How are people interacting at daycare, school? What am I seeing on TV? What happens at family gatherings? They're picking up. So they're watching you. So you need to watch, you need to lead by example in terms of self-modeling behavior. So what I encourage parents to do is kind of take a look at maybe some toxic parenting beliefs you may have. Like, and I call them toxic, and some are more to a heavy degree than others. But you got to look at some of your beliefs you might have picked up. It's not that you just believe this for no reason. You picked it up somewhere. So the belief that children are either good or bad. So children are born and some are good, some are bad, some are easy, some are not easy. I think that is more of a myth. There's medical conditions or different situations, genetics. Yes, I'm not a doctor, but we got to look past children are either good or bad. As a parent, you must always be in control. You don't always have to be in control. If you let go of control, not only will you help the parent-child relationship, you'll help yourself let go of a lot of stress, let go of a lot of anxiety. Often when we're feeling overwhelmed emotionally, we tend to want to control something because we have a loss of control. So what do? We try to control our children. We try to control how they act, how they speak, what they wear, what they do. We got to let go of that. Another belief I think is toxic is you must raise a successful kid. I think too often now, and I think social media is great, and I use social media, but we want to post these pictures, and we want to post what our children are winning or what they're doing, and it's almost like a competition of success. And nobody can tell you what success is. Success becomes from internally. So your child will figure out what success means for them. So as a parent, we don't want to force them to be successful because that term can mean so many different things. Another one is children should respect their parents or their elders no matter what. I think that one is very important. And what I teach my children, I've taught and I've worked with many children over the years, is just because they're your parent or just because they're in a profession such as a teacher or a counselor or a policeman, it doesn't mean they're not a person first. Everyone's a person first before they're a parent or they're in some job, and human beings can have emotions take over and not be doing a great job of things. A parent can have their emotions take over and not doing a great job of things. So a child doesn't have to respect you, the parent or the adult, for no reason. You need to earn that respect. That respect from the child has to be earned. In the parent-child relationship, it's a two-way road. Give respect and you'll get respect. And the other one I'll mention in terms of parenting beliefs, and there's so much talk about devices, and lots of people talk to me about device use and phone use and social media as kids get older. Get off your own phone, because if you're on your own phone all day and you're trying to tell your kids to get off their phone and get off their devices, and you're trying to limiting their device time, but they're seeing you on your phone all the time, that's sending a hypocritical message. So that's just a small example of modeling behavior. These other things I mentioned is you want to role model behavior so children can follow your lead as the leader in the team. So we looked at examining parenting style. We looked at developing a teamwork approach, and we looked at looking at some of our own toxic parenting beliefs and modeling behavior. And now I want to focus on looking at how to build strong connection and how to effectively communicate with your children. Because within the parent-child relationship, the foundation a lot of times is building a strong connection, building a connection you can fall back on, and using effective communication as a parent. So these tools will help you nurture this parent-child relationship so it's secure, so it's safe, and where you can make mistakes as a parent. And if you have a secure relationship, those mistakes are okay. You can just apologize, undo that, maybe have an embrace, and you move on in your day-to-day life. But when that parent-child relationship is not in a great spot, and their behaviors will come out, and it might take 2 to 3 hours to move past something that could take 2 to 3 minutes. So connecting to children is one of the most challenging experiences a parent will have, but also one of the most rewarding. As human beings, we all strive for connection. I know for myself, as far as I remember as a little kid, I'm trying to be connected to my siblings, to my parents, to my grandparents, to my aunt, to my uncle, to my friends. And as I got older, relationships with an intimate relationship, I'm looking for connection. The science, every book I read, I'm a big reader. A lot of it is about human beings. We look for connection. We're looking for connection. We strive for connection. So your child doesn't want to be bossed around. They don't want to be criticized, because that is going to break down the connection. They want to feel that you love them, that you accept them, that you see who they are. You're not trying to make them someone you're not. So by trying to connect in that way, you're building strong, real connection. Your child needs to know that you're focused on connecting with them and helping them. And through communication, that's how you show this, that mistakes are okay and you're helping them learn from mistakes. You're not blaming them, you're not shaming them, and you're not punishing them. Because that is going to cause a lot of emotional harm, and you're going to really hurt your child. And as I've worked with hundreds of children over the years, things that their parents say to them, things that their caregivers or parents do to them, those things stick with them. And if they have a belief that their parent wants them to be someone that they're not, that really sits at their core, and that's a self-limiting belief, and that impacts how they do at school, how they develop friendships, how they enter an intimate relationship, and how they will eventually start a family of their own. A lot of stuff comes down to the parent-child relationship in terms of, how do we think our parent feels of us? Do we know our parent is proud of us? Do we know that they accept us? So four other common strains that I would say that are put on the parent-child relationship. Number one is a lack of self-awareness of our own emotions. Number two, the inability to talk about or to teach our children about emotions. Number three, poor communication skills. And number four, the inability to build a real and strong connection. As a parent, our emotional intelligence is key. There's lots more talk and research out there about emotional intelligence now, and I think that's great. We need to invest in that. We need to figure out what's going on within ourselves internally, and that'll help us externally parent. Effective communication involves the self-awareness of your own emotions and the ability to have an empathetic understanding of our children's emotions that they may be feeling. Empathy is the ability to sense your child's emotions, coupled with the ability to imagine what your child might be thinking or feeling, and seeking to understand what is really going on for them. So we've heard that saying, put yourself in the other person's shoes. That's what we want to do in the parent-child relationship in terms of seeking to connect when we're communicating, using empathy. Emotions shape our internal world and our external world. We feel our emotions all day. Every interaction that we have with another human being, there's an exchange of emotional energy. Our parent-child relationship is that. It's an exchange of energy. It's an exchange of feelings. It's an exchange of emotions. Yes, it's way more pleasant when our child's happy and excited. That's a great exchange. But like I said earlier, with the positive emotions, there's also the hard to kind of handle emotions, the sadness, the anger, the fear. We have to give our children permission that it's healthy to have those feelings, that it's healthy to be angry if something doesn't go your way, or to be sad, or to be scared, but help them to co-regulate, to teach them how to self-regulate, and then let those emotions come and feel them. Don't suppress them. Don't numb them. I mentioned earlier about growing up in the 80s and 90s, and I think a lot of my generation and people just numbed out emotions. We suppressed them. If something was unpleasant coming up in this, we just pushed it down again. And I could say as a man, the message often is to not feel emotions, and to just be a provider and carry on and suck it up. And I know it's also for women as well. And I understand that, but I just know for boys, it's really important to really give them permission to feel emotions. When you and your child share the experience of emotions together, that is how true connection is made. Over all my years of working with children and fostering children, and these are children who in and out of jail, violent, right? some of the best moments that we've ever shared was after they had an aggressive outburst or a violent episode, as you could call it, where they lost control and anger took over. We would sit together and I would give them space and allow them to tell me why they did that. And they would cry. They would feel safe. And that took years of building that relationship, or months, right? But if you look at just the behavior, you could be like, oh, that's scary. Let's stay away from that. But we have to look deeper than that. And if you have a moment like that with your child where they do something that you're like, oh, like that is just out of control, that's the moments where you go deeper, where you sit in that together. You sit in that uncomfortable stuff together and you show them that you got them. You show them that anyone can lose control. I can lose control. You can lose control. But we need to just work on ways to not lose control. And if you have that release, you give them a permission to have a release, then you can get to what they will feel better. After those violent or aggressive episodes I just talked about, that's how those children felt better afterwards, was getting that out. And me not punishing them for it or telling them that's horrible what you just said or what you just did, shaming, punishing, blaming. You don't want to tell your child you're disappointed in them. No, you may be disappointed in something they did or something they said, but that's not your child, the person. Separate that. When your child feels safe and understood within the parent-child relationship, and that you will communicate to them about feelings, then they'll stop engaging in the behavior as much. They will voice what's going on. They will let you know. Too often nowadays, and always, I think, we get caught up as a parent, and I mentioned it earlier in this talk about all the things we have to worry about and all the things we have to worry about our child, and we get too busy to really just sit and spend time with our children. The key to the parent-child relationship is talking. My children that I have now, and my children that I've fostered, and the children I work with, they told me all the time, Michael, Dad, I'm so tired of you talking. I'm so tired of you talking about this. Oh, but that means that I talk a lot, and they talk to me a lot. Lots of times when they're not saying they're tired of me talking, they're talking to me because I listen just as much as I talk. And sometimes they'll brush me off, and sometimes they'll open up. And we have those moments where it's like, and you get those goosebumps, right? You feel the goosebumps when you connect with your child or you connect with your partner, right? And we all have those moments where, okay, where you fully understand one another, where you're having that emotional exchange. And when you can have that in the parent-child relationship, that's true connection. So we want to help move our children to a receptive state of mind, opposed to a emotional reactive state of mind. As the parent, we want to be in a receptive state of mind, opposed to an emotional reactive state of mind. We want to enter every situation with our parents, with our children, or with our parents, I guess, in a curious way, in an open way, in an accepting way. We don't want to.
Michael?
Yes.
Hey, I just wanted to give you a 5-minute warning, and you do have a question.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to finish with this one part because I like to pass this knowledge on, and then we'll go on to questions. Does that work? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So we heard some stuff about the brain before, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But I'm a big believer in teaching ourselves and our children about how the brain works. The little brain, I call it, and Dan Siegel had called it that, and many other people. So the amygdala, where we hold our emotions, and then there's the big brain, I like to call it the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe. So we are capable of going into our little brain, so are our children. So if we talk to our children a lot about emotions, what they do to us, how we enter our little brain, like that's survival mode. We're looking for threats, fight, flight, freeze. As a parent, we can enter our little brain, we can go fight, flight, or freeze. We want to move back to our thinking brain, our critical thinking brain. Will we ever be able to not feel emotions? No, that'll always happen. But the ability to recognize when we're in our little brain and when our children are in the little brain are key. So as a parent, if you see a negative behavior, if you see something that you don't like or makes you feel something, remember the 5 R's. So you want to, number 1, recognize. Number 2, you want to choose to respond. Number 3, you want to help your child regulate. Number 4, you want to relate. And number 5, you want to reason. So the 5 R's. So recognize is recognizing there's a situation going on. My child is trying to tell me something. I see them doing that to their sibling. I see them doing that. Something's going on. They're trying to tell me something without their words. So I'm going to recognize that's going on. I'm going to recognize I need to stop what I'm doing. I need to put on pause what I'm doing. And I need to choose to respond to this situation. I'm not going to emotionally react. If I'm feeling emotionally angry or upset, and I'm like, oh, I'm trying to do my work, or I don't have time for this. I'm going to work that out within myself. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to take a moment to sort myself out so I don't take that out on my kid. And then I'm going to help them regulate. I'm going to remind them how to self-regulate, depending on the age, right? Or also I'm going to co-regulate with them. We're going to find a safe space together. We're going to do something together that we can help regulate these emotions. Relate, empathy, right? You're going to relate to their situation. Oh, I wouldn't have liked that either. That really does suck. I would have been angry too. I would have been sad too. So after you do those 4 R's, after your child is from their little brain to their big brain, you as the parent are in your big brain. So you're both thinking, emotional release has happened, then you're going to reason. So then you're going to go into, I think you could have done a different behavior. Maybe you could have done this. Remember when we talked about this? That's discipline, right? Look, going into discipline and different things like that. So those are the 5 R's. And I'll stop there. So then we have time if there's any questions.
Yes, there's a question from Rachel, who tends to be a permissive parent. Can you give an example of a limit without being authoritarian?
Well, if you tend to be a permissive parent, yes, that's common. Because, and then when we talk about positive parenting, right? And we talk about different ways of doing things than we used to do, we don't want to go from one extreme to the other, right? So when I work with children or when I've parented children, any limit I put in, I take the time, you sit down and discuss why there's a limit, what you're trying to teach them. A lot of times it's in terms of safety or structure. So we're not trying to control them. We're not trying to boss them around, but like, this rule is in place because it keeps you safe. This is a limit because we need to have a household that kind of runs in a certain way. So once you put a limit in place though, you need to make sure you're consistent as the parent. Control yourself. You can't control what your kid's going to do. But if you put a limit in place and you change your mind, or you're lax or you're permissive, you're sending them mixed messages, right? You're sending them confusing messages of saying, well, sometimes this is what you have to do. Well, other times I'm going to let it go.
Thank you so very much, Michael Larson. It was wonderful to have you present. And did you want to add anything else before we wrap up?
Well, I could go on and on, but I'm good. That's yeah, it was great being here, and thank you for inviting me. I enjoy listening to the speakers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So
you were great too, and we learned so much information. I think it was a wonderful day and wonderful 3 hours with a lot packed in, and it was just wonderful. So thank you, Kristen, Mozeiko, Reverend Madeline. I don't know who else we have on. I think Leanne, she's sleeping because it's time in Australia. Monica and Susan Nason. Wonderful, wonderful talks. Thank you so very much. Peace, love, namaste, and all that good stuff, everyone. Have a wonderful Sunday.
You as well, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.